news in Ottawa and the Valley. This is City News, now on 101.1 FM and 1310 AM.
It's Tuesday, June 8th. Good morning. I'm Andrew Boyle. Right now in Ottawa, 25 degrees. Feels like 33. In Smiths Falls, 23. It feels like 30. Here's what's making news in Ottawa and the Valley. A vigil is planned this evening in London, Ontario. It will mark the tragedy with 4 members of the same family run down by a pickup truck. One man has been arrested, facing 4 counts of murder. A reaction coming in around the world, including from Ottawa's police chief. Here's City News reporter Alex Gouge.
In a series of tweets, Police Chief Peter Slowly says the OPS Hate Crime Unit and the service's senior leaders are working with the Muslim community in Ottawa to assess and address safety concerns present in the city. While Slowly says there is no related threat in Ottawa at this time, police will continue to support the capital's Muslim community. With that, OPS is encouraging residents to report any hate-related incidents they see. Mayor Jim Watson is also echoing Slowly's reaction and says in a tweet, regrettably, Islamophobia still exists in our society and efforts must be doubled in order to address this form of hate and racism. Alex Gouge, City News.
City News time, 9:01. Now your forecast with meteorologist Jill Taylor.
Heat warning continues for Ottawa, the Valley, and Smiths Falls today. Mainly cloudy, scattered showers and thunderstorms, especially this afternoon. High 31 will feel like 39 with the humidity. Tonight, cloudy and 20, and tomorrow, sun and cloud, the high 29. For today, the high 31.
And right now in Ottawa, it's 25 degrees. It does feel like 33. It's 23 in Smiths Falls. It does feel like 30. Owners of stores and restaurants and bars all scrambling now to get ready for this partial reopening on Friday, with the province announcing this 3 days ahead of schedule. Operators who were planning for Monday are now scrambling to get staff in place and have their business ready for in-person visits Friday. Non-essential retail may have lineups at the door because capacity is limited to 15%. Patios will feature just 4 people per table. It also does mean things like children's day camps and outdoor fitness classes are allowed to resume as well. A computer glitch brought down many of the world's top popular websites this morning. New York Times, CNN, Reddit, all briefly offline. Web traffic hitting a red light at a cloud computing company based in San Francisco. We get the details from our senior business editor, Mike Eppel.
Logging onto certain websites showed in some cases the words Fastly error. Now, that wasn't some computer code. Fastly is the name of the cloud computing company that routes the web traffic. Dozens of sites, including the New York Times, CNN, Twitch, Reddit, The Guardian, the UK government's homepage, all could not be reached for a time this morning. San Francisco-based Fastly acknowledged there was a problem, said it was updating and continuing to investigate the issue. Company says that issue has now been identified and a fix has been applied. Customers, though, may still experience some issues on a sporadic basis. Fastly describes itself as an edge cloud platform providing vital but obscure behind-the-scenes cloud computing services to many of the web's high-profile sites. At the Business Center, I'm Mike Eppel.
City News time, 9:03. Police in Ottawa looking into a flasher. Reports recently a flasher made the rounds on social media. Ottawa Police Service confirming to City News they're aware of 2 separate reports of indecent exposures in the East End. This has happened over the last few weeks. Now, in both the cases, the OPS says the vehicle and suspect descriptions are similar, but they're not releasing any other details at the moment. Reports on social media say the suspect is a man driving a black pickup truck in the Covent Glen, Orleans Woods area. Police want to remind the public how important it is to report those types of crimes. I'm Andrew Boyle for News Anytime. Follow up online at ottawa.citynews.ca.
Good, bad, or complicated.
There's no news in Ottawa and the Valley he won't talk about.
It's the Rob Snow Show on Rogers TV and City News.
101.1 FM and 1310 AM.
Is it just me, or is it even muggier today? What is the relative humidity right now anyway? Like 1,000%? Like, not the best sleeping weather. The old air conditioner is getting a workout. But you know what? I haven't done this in a while. I spent some time doing this morning. I used to do this all the time on my old radio show. When The Ontario Liberals were in power. You remember the Ontario Liberals, Dalton McGuinty, Kathleen Wynne? Oh, wasn't that a treat? They couldn't build wind farms and solar farms fast enough all across Ontario, right? The Green Revolution. Al Gore comes to Toronto twice, all expenses paid by you. Yeah, Al Gore. But today, you see, today is going to be a very big day for energy consumption in Ontario, for the consumption of hydroelectricity. And the IESO, government agency, tracks all of this stuff in real time. Independent electricity system operator. Okay? It runs the grid, the electricity grid. And it says, I looked this up half an hour ago. It says peak electricity consumption in Ontario today will be 21,249 megawatts at 6 p.m. Because the air conditioners will be on full blast and people will be home. They'll be running the dishwasher, have the stove on, whatever appliances running. Yeah. And when it comes to electricity supply in Ontario, that means we're going to be just about maxed out because of the muggy weather, because our total generating capacity in Ontario, again, not according to Rob Snow, according to the IESO government agency, it's 22,889 megawatts. So we will be using about 92% of Ontario's installed capacity of electricity generation today here. June 8th, 2021. Okay, that's a lot. So we're way above normal. So I looked it up this morning. It's all publicly available right now. Okay, all of those wind turbines, from one end of the province to the other. We're building new ones right now. Okay, built with massive taxpayer subsidies, lavish hourly rates paid to the wind farm companies, okay? Whether these wind farms produce power or not, that's the great thing for them. Whether they produce any electricity or not, they're getting paid. Public money, your money, tens of billions of dollars. Okay? You know how much electricity these wind farms are producing today on what will be, you mark my words, one of the hottest, muggiest, stickiest, sweatiest days of the year, okay? June 8th, 2021. How much electricity are wind farms in Ontario producing today? Get a load of this, ladies and gentlemen. How about a whopping 1.4%? Okay, 1.4% of Ontario's electricity being generated by wind farms, according to the government's own agency. 1.4%. Look, I'm telling you, folks, this is how incompetent the Ontario Liberals were. Okay, if we had to rely on wind power in Ontario on a day like today, people would die. They would die of heat stroke. They would die in the dark. Thank you. Dalton McGuinty, Kathleen Wynne, George Smitherman. You all haunt us still. You should all be so proud. Oh, visionaries. Give me a break. As a heat-induced rant. Heat rage. Rob Snow has heat rage. Yeah, this is the Rob Snow Show on City News. We have a very busy program ahead. Much to discuss. Some great guests are coming on the show to talk about the big news stories of the day. This is where the newsmakers make news. I'm trying to pitch that on the brass here. Rob Snow Show, where the newsmakers make news. It's got a nice ring to it, right? Jim Watson, Ottawa Mayor. We're all business with the mayor this morning. We're going to talk about Ontario's latest version of the grand reopening. How many of these have we had now? Okay, grand reopening. You know, if we have many more of these, you know what it's also going to say? Under new management. Anyway, the latest grand reopening's been moved up by a few days. Friday now instead of Monday. We'll get the mayor's take on that. We'll talk about vaccine supply. Is Ottawa getting its fair share of vaccines? Electric buses. Well, at least they're not windmills. They're just electric buses, okay? What's this going to cost the city? Why are we doing this? Is politics involved? That's one of the allegations. Could that be possibly one of the motivations here? Okay. Electrifying the city's bus fleet. Big bucks, okay? No doubt about it. Hard for a municipal politician to turn down $400 million from an upper level of government. And this was a big announcement from the feds for Ottawa yesterday. $400 million. From the Canada Infrastructure Bank. It's a loan, as I understand it. It's a loan, but I'll ask the mayor about it. We'll get the mayor's take on it. And depending on how much time we have, I may be able to sneak in a few more questions. He's going to be here. What time? 9:15, right? Let's see if I can wrap this rant up a little sooner. Maybe we'll get some more time with the mayor. Professor Ian Lee, Sprott School of Business, Carleton University, always has a hot take on the hot news stories of the day. Going to talk about the Air Canada news. Okay. Senior executives, the most senior executives, were shamed. How else do you describe it? They were shamed. Basically, that's what it was. Shamed into returning executive bonuses, okay, in the millions of dollars. Air Canada is just one of those Canadian Air Canada. It's kind of like the banks. It's kind of like the big grocery store chains. You know, remember the grocery store chains? They ran a bread cartel. They fixed the price of bread. They're just kind of companies that Canadians love to hate. It's a national pastime. Hating the banks, hating Loblaws, hating Air Canada. Air Canada, sun chips. Thank you so much for splurging on sun chips. Oh, these are so yummy. Air Canada, let's think about this, the pandemic journey of this company, okay? It wouldn't give rebates to passengers, hoarded that money, and then was using it to try and buy a rival airline, Air Transat. You remember it was going to try and buy Air Transat. Air Canada, while all of that was going on, is begging and pleading with the federal government, we need money, we need money, we need money. We need money, we're going to run out of money. So finally, the Trudeau government comes along after more than a year and says, fine, okay, here's almost $6 billion, and $10 million of that is going where? Oh, to top executives. In bonuses! In bonuses! Gosh, how frustrating is that to hear? You know, we're told, look, it's all the company can do to keep the lights on, right? Thousands of staff laid off, flight crews, pilots laid off, no jobs, let alone bonuses, no jobs. But the execs are cashing in with $1 million bonuses. I don't know, it doesn't sit well with me, but you know what? I'm not a university professor. Ian Lee is, and he has a different take. And London, Ontario, just terrible news. We're going to have an expert on our show this morning, an expert in terrorism investigations. That's our angle, because there are calls for this to be labeled a terrorist attack. And I think, and it's just my own opinion, I think when you read the language of the criminal law in this country on terrorism, what a terror attack is, and then you think about what this person is alleged to have done in London, Ontario, I see no reason why it wouldn't be labeled as an act of terrorism. But we will ask our expert to weigh in and gather your opinions during the Talkback Hour on that issue and all the other important news stories of the day. We do the Talkback Hour between 10 and 11 o'clock. Our call-in line for your opinions is 750-1310, 750-1310, 613-750-1310, here on The Rob Snow Show on City News.
It started out with a small outdoor booth in what was called Artist Alley, which is actually the area just outside our store on William Street, where for a couple of years we sold our jewelry directly on the street. And then we slowly evolved to having an indoor location in this building, 55 Borrowed Market Square, We then moved to another location in Place de Ville, and then moved back down here on Dalhousie Street at Irrigere in the 90s, and then back into this building again in 2000 as a collection. I do a collection of jewelry called Cirque that's mainly beaded work with a combination of semi-precious and vintage beads. And then she does a hat collection called Fanfreluche that's all cut and sewn hats in a variety of fabrics and for all of the seasons of the year. We've curated and sourced the artisans that we represent in a lot of different ways over the years since it's been, since 1985. Some people come to us since we're known, and other artisans that we represent might recommend that they come and see us. Some people we find at craft shows, or we see their work, somebody wears it in, and we go and track it down and bring it. And then some people, interestingly, are with us in one medium, and then sometimes they evolve to another. They're all Canadian and mainly local. With the roughly 50 people that we have, I'd say more than half of those are Ottawa-Gatineau, and then the rest are from other cities in Canada, Montreal, Toronto, Vancouver, etc. If you can afford it, go to a small business and spend some money. It's lovely when you come in and, give me a pep talk and tell me how much you love this place and you've been coming here for years. But if you can afford it, please spend some money too, because all the pep talks in the world are not going to pay my rent, which is still full rent even when we're closed. Then secondly, if you can't afford to spend money, follow the businesses that you want to support on social media. Go to their Instagram, go to their Facebook, follow their Twitter, and then retweet, share their Facebook page, like and comment, because if you can't afford to, as many of us can't right now, to do extra expenditures, doing all of those little things like that will raise the visibility of those small businesses, and hopefully for them result in some online or curbside or other business for them.
Opinion
The Rob Snow Show returns.
on Rogers TV and City News
1011 FM.
and 1310 AM.
Saying good morning to Ottawa Mayor Jim Watson. Good morning, Mr. Mayor.
Good morning. How are you, Rob?
I'm okay. How are you?
Good, thank you.
News is kind of depressing lately, though, isn't it, Mr.
Yeah,
Mayor?
very sad what happened in London. That was something, you hope never happens in your own country, but unfortunately we have some people with some very mean intentions, and an entire family, 3 generations were lost in that act of violence.
Yeah, it's very terrible, and you've had to kind of play that role before when tragedy hits your community as a mayor. It's Mayor Holder's turn now, I suppose, but you have to provide the city with some comfort in that circumstance, don't you?
Yeah, it's a combination of comfort and as much information as possible, because I think back on things like the Corporal Cirillo's murder at the National War Monument, a lot of rumors and misinformation out there, and you have to work to get that message out, both to comfort and calm people, but also to ensure that the information that we're sending out is accurate and it doesn't worsen the situation. And you think back on everything. I was mayor, I think, for a month and a half, and the ice storm came. Then we had, of course, floods in West Carleton, Britannia, Cumberland, and the tornado in Nepean and South Ottawa. Yeah. So, and the bus crashes, obviously, at Westboro and Barhaven. So there have been a lot of challenging times, but it's not just one person. It's the great work of people like our police and firefighters and paramedics and public health officials and community volunteers that pull together in our time of need.
And we're going to see that in London too, right? Community. Yeah, it's a terrible thing that has happened, but the reaction. I mean, people are horrified, but there is a sense of community and love, really, that comes through as well, I think. We're seeing that, too.
We've seen that, Rob, as you know, when there's been attacks on, I think of Reverend Bailey, a wonderful pastor from Parkdale United, when they've someone spray painted the N-word, or attacks on Rabbi Bolka's synagogue, or
personal attacks on you, Mr. Mayor. Right? So,
that's true, but that affected my property. These are issues that affect the entire community, and this kind of Islamophobia and anti-Semitism that we're seeing, and homophobia as well, obviously. That's why I'm glad Chief Slowly brought back the hate crimes unit, because unfortunately we're seeing a rise in these kinds of hate crimes. And, I'm glad they've arrested a suspect, and he'll go through the judicial process. But, I saw a picture of the family and the poor, 9-year-old boy that's left without parents and a grandmother. It's pretty heartbreaking.
Yeah.
And we're not immune from it.
No, absolutely.
Not to that extent, obviously, thank goodness. But
well, if it can happen in London, Ontario, it's a lovely, lovely place, as you know. Our time is limited, so we'll have to move along. I know that you requested from the Premier more doses of vaccine for Ottawa, 40,000 doses. I'm wondering what progress has been made with that request, Mr. Mayor.
Well, I just sent the letter yesterday, so in fairness to the Premier, obviously he gets a lot of letters and emails, but it really is a point of frustration on our part, Rob, here in the city of Ottawa. When we get the doses, we get them in on the arms very quickly. In fact, I think on June 5th, just a few days ago, we had a record of over 15,000 doses administered in Ottawa, which is great. But the problem, as you know, is when they lower the age eligibility, from 90 to 80 to 70, as they did on Monday, and they don't increase the proportionate amount of doses, we end up with this great frustration on the part of the public, with 2 laptops going and 2 phone lines going, trying to get that elusive appointment. And, literally tens of thousands of people can't get through and get an appointment. And that really frustrates people, particularly, our elderly and kids and grandkids of the elderly trying to get their second doses. So we've, in the past, when Toronto and Peel were the hot spots, we recognized they needed a disproportionate number of doses. But now it's time to level the playing field and make sure that we in Ottawa get our fair share of doses so we can get people double vaccinated by September.
Okay. What do you think of the moving up of the reopening? Stage 1 of the reopening.
Well, I'm very pleased with that on 2 fronts. First of all, that the province did give a little bit more notice. You remember last time it was, I think, 24 hours, and a lot of food had to go to waste in the restaurant industry, and people were laid off right away. So this gives them a little bit more runway. I'm glad it's earlier than next Monday. And now it's up to us to handle the reopening responsibly. Shades of hundreds of people milling about at the Byward Market is what happened a year or so ago. That's not going to be helpful. I think people have to really be cautious about going out. We don't have to have every single person go out trying to find a patio seat on the first night. Maybe spread some time between your visits, okay. And let's give these restaurants, a fighting chance to survive.
Okay, I want to get into the announcement yesterday, electrifying the bus fleet. I'm not opposed to electrifying the bus fleet. I'm not some kind of dinosaur. I think, when it comes to motor vehicles, this is the way the world is moving, and I'm fine with it. But everything has a cost, and, we want to keep an eye on the bottom line, right? So how do you know that these electric buses are the right vehicle for Ottawa? Has there been a pilot? What's been going on with these electric vehicles here?
Well, they've been in use in at least 4 or 5 Canadian cities, including Winnipeg, that has a similar climate to Ottawa. Okay. We'll have 4 buses as our first pilot project come into the city in the next couple of months. And that will give us an opportunity to test them in fall, winter, spring conditions before any order goes in. And as you know, just like the electric vehicles in cars, the price keeps going down. You think about your cell phone, the big clunker cell phones that we all had. You're too young to remember those big ones. They're like bricks. They've come down in price.
Yeah, but I also remember Beta machines, and they cost thousands of dollars. And I'm worried: are we buying a Betamax when we should be waiting for the Blu-ray player? Mr. Mayor.
Just as a little aside, you mentioned Betamax. When I was running for president of the Rideau River Residents Association at Carleton, my big promise was to buy 2 Betamax machines to lend to each floor.
Yeah, so what, are you just signing us up for 450 new Betamax machines here?
No, because Canada actually has become a world leader in electric buses. You know, the plants Flyer Force in Winnipeg, there's another company in Quebec, another one in British Columbia. So we're actually doing very well with the technology, and these products now are not just simply cars, they're high-tech vehicles. And this will reduce significantly, obviously, our greenhouse gases. Cars are one of the biggest emitters or vehicles are one of the biggest emitters. And it's going to be staged in. By 2023, we'll have 74. By 2027, 450 buses. And by 2036, the full fleet will be converted to electric, which will make Ottawa, I believe, the first city in Canada to have 100%.
I guess what I want to get at, because in the talking points that were released yesterday, it says it's a loan, $400 million loan, to cover higher upfront capital costs of electric buses compared to diesel buses.
Right.
So this $400 million, does the city have to pay that back to the infrastructure bank?
Well, we also are eligible for a grant from the federal government, as is every other city. They made a major announcement about that. And this is to pay for the cost differential between a diesel bus, which is about $620,000, versus an electric bus, which is about $1.1 million. So it's a very good deal for the city of Ottawa and for our passengers that we end up getting a low-interest rate from the Infrastructure Bank of Canada. And those costs are covered by a combination of what we would be paying for a bus in any event, plus the grant from Infrastructure
I understand
Canada.
it, but it is a loan of $400 million, right? It's a loan of $400 million?
That's correct.
Okay, all right. That's what I wanted to, that's my primary point, okay?
Yeah, and look, there'll always be debate on whether this is a good investment. I think, you know, anyone who's been stuck behind one of those old diesel buses, you see firsthand the spew of dirty fuel coming out the top of the bus. We can do better in a modern, caring society like we have here in Ottawa.
Okay, one final quick question, because I know you're tight on time. Why aren't there lifeguards at the beaches when we have a 40-plus humidex outside?
Well, a couple of reasons. We have a start date at the beaches next weekend, primarily because a lot of our lifeguards are still in school. They're high school students, so that often delays. We are opening this weekend our 8 outdoor pools, which will have lifeguards on the weekend, and then the beaches open, I believe, the week after that. And we've got all our splash pads open, so that's one cooling option, and we have cooling centers throughout the city.
Okay, good to talk to you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you.
Stay cool.
Bye-bye. You too.
Bye now.
Yeah. Ottawa Mayor Jim Watson. Rob Snow Show, Professor Ian Lee coming up next here on City News.
local news in Ottawa and the Valley. This is City News, now on 101.1 FM and 1310 AM.
It's Tuesday, June 8th. Good morning. I'm Andrew Boyle. Right now, 26 degrees in Ottawa. It feels like 34 with the humidity, 24 in Smiths Falls, and it's feeling like 31. Here's what's making news this hour. The Prime Minister is going to address the attack in London, Ontario in about a half an hour's time from now. Then NDP leader Jagmeet Singh is also going to address this issue about an hour from now. A vigil will be held tonight for the family mowed down in London on a sidewalk Sunday night. The vigil being held at the intersection in the city where two people in their 40s, one in her 70s, and a teenage girl, all from the same family, were killed. A 9-year-old boy remains in hospital recovering from his injuries. A 20-year-old man facing 4 counts of murder and 1 count of attempted murder. A fire ban now in effect right across the city. The fire service says this ban includes those who do have burn permits. There will be zero tolerance for anyone caught burning anything on their property due to the hot, dry conditions in the region. City News Time, 9:31. I'm Andrew Boyle. For News Anytime, follow up online at ottawa.citynews.ca.
He's the opinionated Ottawa icon.
The Rob Snow Show returns
On Rogers TV and City News.
101.1 FM and 1310 AM.
Good morning, Professor Ian Lee. How are you this morning?
I'm doing very, very well, thank you.
Yeah, it's great to hear from you. Professor Lee is Associate Professor at Sprott School of Business. MBA, are you still teaching MBA students there, Professor?
I teach undergrad and MBA.
Okay.
And I'll be teaching in China. Well, I'll be teaching
in China? Really?
I'll be teaching remotely, but I've been teaching in China since 1997. It's a de facto EMBA, but it's MBA.
Oh, I see. Yeah, right.
But this August, because of the lockdown, which is still, we're in partial lockdown, I'll be teaching it remotely. But I hope to return to my classroom in Shanghai in a year's time.
And Poland, you used to go to Poland.
I've been teaching in Poland since 1991.
Yeah, you love it there, you said.
I do. It's a remarkable country. The IMF did a study about 5 years ago. Somebody can correct me if I'm wrong. I might be out by a year or two. And they studied all the former communist countries after 1989, and basically they created a methodology, unemployment, GDP growth rate, income per capita, a bunch of things like that. Yeah. Standard UN metrics.
Yeah.
And they said, which country succeeded the most, in other words, did the best, post-1989 collapse of communism.
Right.
Poland, by far and away, was the number one. It did better than Czech Republic, better than Hungary, better than all the other countries. Partly they're very disciplined people, very industrious, educated people, but they're very fortunate that their border, just like Canada shares a border with the largest economy in the world, well, they share a huge border with the largest economy in Europe called Germany.
Right. Okay. All right.
And so there's a huge amount of German capital investment. I mean, hundreds of billions in Germany, and German plants all over Poland now because the wages are much, much lower because they're not part of the euro. They still have the Polish zloty.
Okay. I see. Okay. Interesting. Okay, let's talk about some domestic affairs and the Air Canada aid package, okay?
Yes.
So Air Canada, I know you're familiar with the story. Its most senior executives have been shamed, that's my term, into returning their bonuses. They say it's in response to public disappointment. So, look, this company, $5.9 billion in government aid. The middle managers are keeping their money. That's it. The majority of this bonus money, they're keeping it. The big question, and it's a question that I struggle with, Professor. Should a company that needs government help just to stay in business really be paying out multi-million-dollar bonuses to senior staff? What do you think?
I'll put it another way. This question should not be debated. It should not be debated at all. Are we debating that Sidney Crosby is being paid $104 million US dollars over 12 years? Are we debating that Patrick Mahomes?
Nobody's bailing out the Pittsburgh Penguins.
I'll get there.
Okay.
I'll get there in a moment. Okay. The point is, if I'm trying to make precise points here.
Right.
If our objection is high-income people making big bucks, which is the CCPA, Canadian Centre for Policy Alternatives, loves to publish every year showing the big salaries. Okay, as a Canadian bank CEO makes 10 million Canadian dollars to manage 50,000 employees. Okay?
Yeah.
Justin Bieber made 75 million US. That's 100 million Canadian to manage exactly nobody.
The pride of
And he
Stratford.
can't sing. Let's be clear. He can't
He's a good
sing.
singer. He's a good
He's a
singer. Don't be
terrible
mean
singer.
to Bieber, okay? Be a believer, okay?
So my point is if we're going to object about income and income inequality, let's start with the most affluent. And by the way, I have studied the Forbes celebrity list, and which has Canadian and American. And I assure every listener that the highest paid athletes, and the athletes are on this list as well as entertainers, make far more than the average executive in Canada. A Canadian CEO of a bank makes 10 million. People say, 10 million, that's outrageous. Beyonce made 400 million in 1 year, okay? So let's get this into context. That's point one. Now let's go to your point.
You think they're underpaid?
Here's the real scam, okay? The government shut down the economy, not Air Canada. Air Canada and the other businesses across Canada didn't say, gee whiz, we got nothing else to do. Let's just close down.
No, Air
our
Canada was
company
actually
for fun.
doing pretty well, actually.
Okay? They were, in fact, Air Canada, which went bankrupt not once but twice. They liked it so much in the bad old days. By the way, full disclosure, I don't consult, I don't invest in them, but I've been flying on Air Canada for about 35 years. And for about 25 of the last
what
35
choice do you
years-
have? What choice do you have?
Well, hang on. For the previous 25 years, the experience was beyond miserably awful and horrible and just horrible.
Right.
In the last 10 years,
Now it's
under
what?
Rovanescu, who I never met, he turned the airline around, won all kinds of awards, built up the cash reserves, expanded customer service. They won awards for customer service, did a phenomenal job doing what executives are supposed to do.
Right.
Okay. Then the government said, okay, they may have done it for good reasons.
You must
I'm
be
not
flying what?
challenging.
Are you flying business class or first class?
Of course
or?
not. I'm just a poor professor. I'm being very serious. By the way, for those who say, oh, that guy's flying business class to Poland or to China, are you dreaming? The only people that fly business class are presidents and full professors and deans. Ordinary people like me fly at the back of the bus, at the back of the plane. Mr. Trudeau, close your eyes. You won't know about this experience. Down where the toilet is, and it goes whoosh every time someone goes to the bathroom. Okay? I'm at the back of the plane. Mr. Trudeau doesn't know there's a back of the plane. I do. Because that's where I've been flying all my life.
All right.
I can't afford to fly business class.
All right.
Okay?
Yeah.
So my point is, the government, maybe for good reasons, we can debate whether that was the most appropriate way, but we won't get into that. The governments, not just the federal, but provincial too.
Close them down.
Closed everybody down. Said, you may not fly planes. We've closed the border. We've closed the airports. We've closed everything. Okay? And we shut down hotels. We shut down bars, restaurants, barbershops, salons. We shut down the whole economy. And now all these companies need a bailout. And then this is the outrageousness of this bait and switch that the parliamentarians are doing. Okay? Then the companies need bailouts. And so they, working night and day, and they did, because this has been widely reported, they had to do gymnastics to save the company, and they did. And it wasn't just the bailout. They were borrowing and selling off planes and canceling routes, and they did just an amazing amount of things to save the company, which they did. Okay? So then they say, okay, and with corporate salaries, like professional athletes, it's structured with a base salary that's relatively very small, and then you make most of your income through the productivity bonuses. So if you throw so many touchdown passes, you get more money. If you're an airline executive, if you get so many, they have metrics to measure it. So your compensation is in the form of production bonuses. That's how they structure the private sector, not just Air Canada. I'm talking the entire private sector. So along comes the government. They sabotage the industries, close them all down, put them into a situation where they need bailouts. Then they go and get bailouts, and then the government says, you naughty people, look, you're paying your executives for saving your company. This is shameful. And all 338, I think, MPs, it was just disgraceful. Just disgraceful. I mean, I expected that of, the NDP, because they don't like firms that are successful, and they don't. They're very critical of the banks and pharmaceutical companies. I expected that of the Greens, because they don't like oil companies or pharmaceutical companies. They don't like companies that are successful. I didn't expect the Conservatives. I didn't expect the Liberals, the Blue Liberals. Not one of them had the backbone or the integrity. That's a very big word, any politicians listening. Integrity to stand up and say, it is not our job to regulate wages or prices. We don't believe in that in the OECD countries. And the Prime Minister or the Cabinet, has the competencies to sit there and start determining what the proper value is.
Let's also think about a couple of other things that were going on with Air Canada during its pandemic time, okay? It refused to refund ticket purchases.
Yeah.
Okay? People bought tickets. Their flights were canceled. Air Canada wouldn't give them their money back.
I was one of them, by the way.
Okay.
Yeah, I was
That's one thing. Yeah. And at the same, it launched because its weaker rival Air Transat was also on the ropes. So it launched a takeover for Air Transat.
It launched a takeover before COVID, and it canceled it because of COVID.
No, it repriced it. And
they knew that they were going to be turned down, and it was.
Yeah, but look, with that going on, why aren't you taking the money that you're using to try and buy your airline rival? Why not put that into the why not put that into the executive suite? Why not use that to pay off your executives? Okay.
If we're going to criticize them, let's at least.
If you're going to hoard the cash that you're not going to give back to your own darn customers, why don't you use that to pay your executives their bonuses?
They did not launch the bid for Transat during the middle of COVID. That is simply not true.
But they repriced it. They came in at a lower offer later on.
They repriced it at basically getting it for almost nothing. And so guess what? The shareholders of Air Transit said, are you dreaming? Yeah. So they gave them an offer that the Air Canada, so they could walk away from the contract. Them, yeah. I'm answering your question.
All right.
So they could walk away from the contract. They gave a counter. They said, we're not going to honor the offer. We're going to revoke the offer we made pre-COVID when the airline was worth a lot more. And now we're going to give you a new offer, which was so ridiculously low, Air Canada was saying, we don't want to buy Air Transit, okay? So they canceled the deal. Let's call it what it is. They canceled the deal because they said, we need that money. It's much more pressing needs to save the company during this the COVID crisis. So they did what was prudent and responsible. But the larger issue, so people really understand my point here, okay? Yeah. We have thousands and thousands and thousands of executives across Canada in thousands and thousands of companies. Every company has an executive. According to StatsCan, there's over 1 million incorporated companies. Now, yes, a lot of them are very small. Okay, so even if you take them out, there's several thousand mid-sized large companies with executives. The cabinet, the prime minister, the opposition do not have the competencies or the knowledge or the experience or the understanding of labor markets to sit there and start pricing and saying, well, this person should get this much money and that person, that's not their job. We have a decentralized economy. We have labor markets, and for those who say there's no labor markets for high end, that is nonsense on stilts.
Sure. If we have this, free hand of capitalism and the government shouldn't interfere, then maybe these private companies like Air Canada shouldn't be coming to the government begging for billions of dollars and then turning around and giving it to their executives.
Maybe the government shouldn't shut down these industries in the first place. Maybe they should do a better job of maybe they should have done mandatory. I'm serious, Rob.
Okay.
Maybe they should have been done mandatory testing, as I said on your show in March a year ago. They should have put mandatory testing at the airports at the beginning and saying, you may not enter this airport unless you've been tested. And the moment vaccines became available, they should have said, we will not allow anybody to enter an airport or board a plane if you haven't been vaccinated. They still, to this day, the government has been derelict and irresponsible in imposing its will, which it has the legislative and legal authority to do. It could have imposed this and brought the airlines back into business and created the conditions for them to get going again, to turn around. Yeah. I attribute the failures to the government, not to Air Canada. Air Canada was shut down by the government. Air Canada was put into a quasi-bankrupt situation by the government. They created the mess. They screwed up the vaccines. They screwed up the rollout. They screwed up the the mandatory testing and mandatory vaccinations. This has been a botch by government from beginning to end, and they're looking to try to change the channel, change the subject by pointing the finger at someone else and say, see, it's those nasty people at Air Canada that are responsible. This is a scam by the government to evade and deny their own responsibility and culpability.
All right. Be right back. We'll talk about a global corporate tax rate of 15%, an agreement among the finance ministers for the G7 countries. Get the professor's take on that on the Rob Snow Show here on City News.
An old-fashioned traditional grocery store. You're going to find a butcher, okay? You want a steak cut a certain way, you're going to get it. You know, there's flour piled in the warehouse. There's mixers on the floor. There's flour on the floor. The bakery's rented out to Frank Nicolo. It's him and his son come in at night. They mix the dough, they roll the dough, and they bake the dough. It's not the traditional frozen and thaw and put it in the bin, okay? It's made from scratch 7 days a week. It's probably the only bakery left in Ottawa that does that. You know, then customer service. You know, we're big on that. The cashiers, the deli. You're not. If you ask for something, they're not going to point. It's an aisle number 7. They're going to bring you there. Okay. If you have too much groceries out, we'll take it out to your car. You know what I mean? There's nothing we don't do for our customers, and we evolved around our customers. They would come in and say, you know, can you try getting me this? You know, can you get me this? So that's how we built the lineup we have now. Okay, so we have a lot of unique items that someone that came over to, you know, live in Canada hasn't seen this particular product, but we sourced it and we have it for them that, you know, like something they used to have as a kid. We have a lot of those unique items, a lot, you know, from like all over the world. And we source it through, you know, distributors in Montreal and Toronto that bring in the product in bulk, and we piggyback off of them. Probably the largest European deli in Ottawa. We sell lots because people buy lots. It's nothing really complicated about that. You know, we turn over a lot of product. You know, we package it properly. We buy, and we're always consistent. You know, you're always going to find, you know, Cuddy turkey breast. You know, San Daniel mortadella. You're always going to get the same brands. We don't flip back and forth to save 20 cents. It's always the same brands the last 29 years. Best sandwiches in town. It's simple. It starts off with fresh bread every day baked in the store. Anything that's left over goes to breadcrumbs. So you're getting a fresh bun every day that was baked probably 4 hours before you get here, okay? Not only baked, made, like, you know, mix the flour, roll the dough, proof the bread, and bake the bread, okay? Then all the ingredients come right off the shelves. You know, your lettuce, your tomatoes, all your condiments, and they're cut up fresh in the deli. Not like the big, you know, corporate restaurant chains that your lettuce comes in shredded in a bag, you open it up and you throw it in the bin. You know, takes, you know, 2 or 3 days to get here from California. How long is it in the bag? The big difference is like making a sandwich at home and you don't have to do the work. It's really what the trick is, and using the freshest ingredients possible.
Strong opinions.
The Rob Snow Show returns on Rogers TV and City News.
101.1 FM and 1310 AM.
Back with Professor Ian Lee, Sprott School of Business, Carleton University. Let's talk about a global corporate tax rate. Finance ministers from G7 countries have agreed to a proposal for a 15% minimum tax rate for multinationals. The Biden administration initially wanted it to be 21%. The agreement came in at 15%. Janet Yellen, she used to be the chair of the Federal Reserve. She's the Treasury Secretary in the United States now. She says that this agreement could, quote, end the race to the bottom in corporate taxation, where you have countries all over the world competing to have the lowest corporate tax rate. What do you think about this idea, Professor?
I want to respond to that, but I just want to put one more quick point on our previous conversation on the table about giving bonuses back. The Toronto
those poor, hard done by airline executives.
Hang on.
I feel
Toronto Maple Leafs have lost yet again.
Yes.
From my entire life, all they do is lose in the playoffs, and not one politician has ever demanded that they pay back any of their bonuses from shooting pucks into the net over a whole year. And
well, maybe they should. They might win a Stanley Cup. You know?
And I adore Patrick Mahomes, who makes $50 million US a year.
Right.
And he went to the Super Bowl, as I said, he was going to send the old man into the old folks' home. I'm talking Tom Brady.
Right.
He lost to Tom Brady.
Unbelievable.
And nobody said, Patrick Mahomes, you got to give back some of that $50 million.
But the thing is, the Kansas City Chiefs are not going to the White House and asking for government money. Okay.
My point, the principle is, people are saying if you are making too much, you should be giving it back, and that's all I'm pointing out. Is we have a double standard. We have one standard for corporations, and we ideologically cherry pick.
They're taking our money. They're taking our money.
Only because the government created the situation. The government put them into this situation. I have an answer to the government.
Right.
End the lockdown now, and stop the bailouts.
All right.
How's that for a policy proposal?
15% global corporate tax rate to end the race to the bottom on corporate taxation, where you have countries like Ireland and Caribbean tax havens and all of these offshore places where people.
Right.
What do you think?
First off, if an elected government, Congress, President, Prime Ministers want to put forward that proposal, I believe in democracy and they can do so. But I do want to point some things out. First off, that obnoxious phrase that you hear from progressive politicians, race to the bottom. I've heard it from the NDP. I've heard it from the president of Unifor. There is no race to the bottom. In the richest countries of the world, called the OECD, it's a race to the top. To the top. We have the highest average incomes on planet Earth. So let's get rid of this dishonest phrase, race to the bottom. The United States is not at the bottom. It's never been at the bottom, and it won't be in my lifetime be at the bottom. There are countries like Somalia and Ethiopia at the bottom, but no, Canada is not racing to become Ethiopia, and neither is the U.S. So let's cut out the dishonest rhetoric about that. Now to the larger point. I want to put this out there for everyone. The OECD did a landmark study about 5 or 6, 7 years ago. I actually did a paper on it, and it was a meta study where they looked at all the studies of major studies of the past 50 years from U.S., Canada, European Union countries, peer-reviewed studies. Not one study. They looked at hundreds of studies, and they asked a very simple question. There's 4 fundamental types of taxes. There's personal income taxes, we all know about. There's corporate income taxes, and there's property taxes, and there's consumption taxes, called VAT, called GST. And so they said, which one is least destructive to economic growth? Which is the least harmful to economic growth?
Yeah.
Because nothing is neutral. So they said, okay, are some better or some worse? And what they found was, and it was just an eye-opener for all kinds of people, they found that consumption taxes are the least harmful to economic growth because you're not taxing investment or taxing risk. And so economists prefer consumption taxes, and I do too, by the way. Even though I don't like paying them, they are less destructive. They found that corporate income taxes are the most destructive because the study after study after study, and these were peer-reviewed studies, by the way, by serious economists at Harvard, at Chicago, and University of Toronto, Michael Sprott, showing, and that's his name, by the way, showing that with corporate income taxes, the corporations pass them on either through higher prices on the goods of services they sell or through lower wages or both. And this is something that's puzzled me about people that advocate higher corporate income taxes. They really do implicitly believe there's a free lunch. Well, if they're paying more, I'm not paying for it. But that's not true. Every study has shown that they are passed on and they harm investment. I didn't say it terminates investment or makes it go away. It's just that corporate income taxes are not the ideal tax from a policy point of view of economic growth. Unfortunately, out there, people might not like what I'm saying. The least destructive are consumption taxes, not income taxes.
Right.
So what they're doing is, they can do it. Of course they can do it, and they can impose a 15% minimum tax, and it probably will go through, and it'll be politically very popular. It's going to hurt countries like Ireland, because Ireland has used its very tiny status, and it's a very small country, to create a competitive advantage, a country advantage, through a much lower tax rate than other countries. And it's helped Ireland. Ireland has prospered. And so what the big guys are doing, and the United States is the largest economy in the world, they're saying, we don't like these little countries nibbling away and taking money away. So they're presenting it as a fight for social justice, when it's really just good old-fashioned greed of the largest and the most powerful, called the U.S., saying, we want some of that money that you are taking from us. So let's get rid of the moral claims that Janet Yellen is using. We're doing this to, for the little guy and all that. No, they're doing this out of a good old-fashioned Trumpian self-interest.
Okay. I just noticed today there's a historian who writes a daily piece this day in Canadian politics, and it was 26 years ago today, 1995. Mike Harris and the PCs won the big majority government in Ontario.
Yeah.
The Common Sense Revolution. And then he won in 99 again with another big majority, right? So still they hate him on the left.
Yeah, they do.
I mean, hate is not even a strong enough word, right? Yeah. Mike Harris is like Satan. When you think back to the Common Sense Revolution, getting Ontario back on track after the Ray years, what do you think about the job Mike Harris did in Ontario? Mixed?
You've got to remember the context. He came in not very long after Bob Ray, and there was wide agreement. My goodness, there were all kinds of friends of mine in the universities who were voting against Bob Ray in that election, in the subsequent election.
Right.
And I just never thought I'd see the day, but there was great anger and antipathy. And so that was the context.
Because of the social contract, probably.
Well,
right?
yeah, and to the sense that government of Ontario had gone out of control, and the Liberals were given a chance after Bob Ray, and they didn't act on that opportunity to bring things back into control, so the voters turned to Harris. And you're no question you're about what you said about the antipathy and the hatred. It reminds me very, very much of Margaret Thatcher. And I did an op-ed published in the Ottawa Citizen on the death of Margaret Thatcher, and I said, both of them were, about the idea of the common sense, letting people get ahead on their own merits and that sort of thing. And I said, upward mobility is everybody celebrates upward mobility. But I said, what we don't realize, there's a sort of a downside to upward mobility. If someone's going up, someone's coming down, because unless you believe everybody's in the upper class, and that's a contradiction, because if there's 100%, you can't all be in the top quintile if it's only 20%. So my point was that people who think they're going to lose privileges and benefits in the new regime of Thatcher or Mike Harris are going to be really, really angry. And they were. You saw it with Mike Harris and the unions, and you saw it with Thatcher, the unions in England, where they, to this day, they say her name. They're almost spitting when they say her name. And that's because they both were taking away privileges from some very privileged people. And that makes people nobody is enthusiastic about being downwardly mobile and losing some of their, and I don't just mean money. I'm talking about status, social status, prestige, and so I argue that the anger, the hatred of both Harris and Thatcher was due to this sense of downward mobility, that they were going to lose they were going to have less privileges, monetary and social, under Thatcher and under Mike Harris, and that's what drove the incredible hatred, because it isn't rational on the empirics, because he certainly didn't downsize the government of Ontario. The government of Ontario got bigger and bigger, and it continues to get bigger and bigger.
Well, his government, if you think back to that time, because his government, along with all the provinces they were the victims of downloading by the federal government at the time. Right?
That's right.
So,
this was
Chrétien and Martin.
Chrétien and Martin.
Yeah.
And they downloaded big time. A lot of the cuts, yes, they did, no question, fired, terminated some 70,000 public servants, the largest downsizing in Canadian history.
Yeah.
Not by Mike Harris, not by Mulroney, not by Harper, by a Liberal government, Paul Martin. Let's say it again.
Yeah.
And they did a large chunk, not not completely. I documented this in my pink slips and running shoes. But there was a big chunk of their cuts were achieved through downloading onto the provinces and the municipalities. And Harris was at the receiving end, as were the other premiers across Canada. And so again, if you look at the actual facts of the situation, first off, he didn't cut anywhere near as much as people claim he cut. And secondly, a good chunk of those cuts were coming down from the federal government anyway. So I think it was a lot more ideology in terms of Mike Harris. He wasn't a warm and cuddly guy. No. And he didn't reach out to people on the left. No. And so he really generated incredible hatred. But it's reminiscent or analogous, I should say, to the hatred that was there and still is there to this day against Margaret Thatcher. And both came from very ordinary circumstances, by the way. They didn't come from the top.
Yeah. Okay. Interesting take. Thank you. We'll talk soon.
My pleasure, Rob.
Stay cool.
Righto.
Bye-bye. Professor Ian Lee, Sprott School of Business, Carleton University. Talkback hour next on the Rob Snow Show of the City News.
In Ottawa and the Valley. This is City News, now on 101.1 FM and 1310 AM.
It's Tuesday, June 8th. Good morning. I'm Andrew Boyle. Right now in Ottawa, 26 degrees, feels like 34. In Smiths Falls, 24, feels like 31. Here's what's making news in Ottawa and the Valley. In moments from now, the House of Commons will address the hate-motivated attack in London with speeches from the Prime Minister and other federal party leaders. Here's City News Parliament Hill reporter Cormac McSweeney.
The Prime Minister is the first leader to speak, and we can expect Justin Trudeau to give his thoughts and prayers on behalf of the nation to those impacted by this horrific attack. He'll also no doubt address the issue of Islamophobia. In a tweet yesterday, he said this type of hate is insidious and despicable, and it must stop. The Prime Minister has made other changes to his schedule today, canceling a previous announcement, and will instead be holding a news conference to discuss this attack before heading to London later in the day to attend a vigil for the victims and the community. Green Party leader Anna May Paul says this is a time for all politicians to reflect on their own words and ask if they're helping with unity and inclusion in Canada.
Or are we choosing to exploit divisions? Are we choosing to exacerbate those potential divisions? Are we choosing to create polarization in order to secure some kind of advantage.
Paul and NDP leader Jagmeet Singh have also said they'll be attending the vigil tonight. Cormac McSweeney, Parliament Hill.
City News Time at 10:04. Another drop in provincial case numbers of COVID-19. Ontario reporting 469 new cases today. Now, of that number, 13 are in Ottawa. Just one case in Renfrew. No new cases in Leeds, Grenville, Lanark, or the Eastern Ontario Health Unit. Test positivity 2.7% from just over 17,500 tests. The province also reporting 18 more deaths. Ottawa Mayor Jim Watson once again calling on the provincial government to send more vaccine supply to Ottawa. The race to fully vaccinate people continues to gain traction. Here's City News reporter Alex Gouge.
Mayor Jim Watson requested the province send an additional 40,000 doses of vaccine to ease some of the demand. He tells the Rob Snow Show dropping eligibility age without increasing supply creates problems for folks in the capital.
We end up with this great frustration on the part of the public, with two laptops going and two phone lines going, trying to get that elusive appointment. And, literally tens of thousands of people can't get through and get an appointment.
Watson says it's time to level the playing field so the city can vaccinate all residents by September. He is also pleased with the province bumping up its Step 1 reopening, but is calling on residents to be cautious about going out and not all rush out at once. Alex Gouge, City News.
And a burn ban went into effect this morning at 8:30. Ottawa Fire Service says a complete ban is now on open fires. It also extends to those who do have burn permits. I'm Andrew Boyle for News Anytime. Follow up online at ottawa.citynews.ca.
Talk back.
Hello. On the Rob Snow Show. The phone lines are open at 613-750-1310.
Now, the Rob Snow Show continues.
So there are many big stories in the news that we can get into, discuss, debate this morning. Feel free to comment on one of them, all of them. We have the full hour together. We can take some calls. This is your hour. It is the Talkback Hour. Our call-in line is 750-1310. 750-1310, 613-750-1310. And the email address is therobsnowshow@ottawa.citynews.ca. therobsnowshow@ottawa.citynews.ca. London, Ontario. Gosh, London, Ontario. I just had a bad feeling about that story yesterday morning when I first heard that story, and there were so few details about it, and then it was confirmed in the afternoon what had actually happened. Terrible story. Terrible story. Was it a terrorist attack? In your opinion? Do you think that was a terrorist attack? Was that a terrorist attack? 4 people, all members of the same family, same faith, Muslim, run down and killed, murdered. That's the charge. First-degree murder, 4 counts. Motivated by hate is the allegation. Hate of someone of a particular religion. Islam. A terrorist attack. Was it a terrorist attack? What do you think? Should this accused, and I guess we should keep in mind that at this point, that's what this individual is. He is a suspect. He is accused. Okay. He's charged. Perhaps this will end up in a trial at some point, but he is alleged to have done this on purpose. Okay. Planned it out. A news account says he was wearing body armor. One news account says he's wearing body armor at the time of the attack. Pre-planned, targeted, premeditated. Was it a terrorist attack? What do you think? What do you think? Should he be charged with committing an act of terror? A terrorism-related offense? 750-1310, 750-1310, 613-750-1310. The Prime Minister is speaking in the House of Commons right now. The Prime Minister, Justin Trudeau, is speaking to this event that happened Sunday around 8:30 in the evening, Sunday night in London, Ontario. This is the Prime Minister in the House.
We stand in solidarity with their loved ones during this extremely difficult time. And we all hope that that little boy will be able to heal from his injuries quickly, even though we know he will have to live a very long time with the sadness, anger, and incomprehension caused by this cowardly Islamophobic attack.
Ce n'est malheureusement.
This is unfortunately not an isolated event. The mosque in Quebec City
Of Mohammed Aslam Zafis at a mosque in Toronto. The violent attacks against black Muslim women in Edmonton. And so many other people across the country who faced insults, threats, and violence. They were all targeted because of their Muslim faith. This is happening here in Canada. And it has to stop. Monsieur le Président.
Mr. Speaker, we must not become desensitized to this violence. We must not accept this as normal. Every time that we witness such hate, we must call it out. This starts with small actions.
They can be a seed that grows into an ugly, pervasive trend, and sometimes they lead to real violence. The jokes that are not funny, the casual racism, the insinuations that are only meant to diminish, the toxic rhetoric, the disinformation and the extremism online, the polarization we see too often in our public discourse and in our politics. As leaders and as Canadians, we not only have to say enough is enough, we must take action. We cannot allow any form of hate to take root, because the consequences can be far too serious. We've seen it in Christchurch. We've seen it in other places around the world, and we've lived it here at home. Right now, Canadians are outraged by what happened on Sunday, and many Muslim Canadians are scared. Last night, I spoke with the Mayor of London, Ed Holder, and a representative of the local Muslim community, Nawaz Tahir, to share my condolences and discuss the urgency of what more we must do to keep our communities safe. Mr. Speaker, we stand with the people of London and with Muslim communities across the country. We're going to continue to fund initiatives like the Security Infrastructure Program to help protect communities at risk and their schools and places of worship. We'll continue to fight hate online and offline, which includes taking even more action to dismantle far-right hate groups, like we did with the Proud Boys, by adding them to Canada's terror listing. And we'll continue doing everything we can to keep communities safe.
Okay, so that's the Prime Minister speaking in the House of Commons right now, Prime Minister Justin Trudeau, on the events of Sunday, London, Ontario. Question for you, again, this is the Talkback Hour, Rob Snow Show, 750-1310, 750-1310. Was it a terrorist attack? A lot of people are calling it a terrorist attack. I'd like to know what you think, and this is the relevant language in the criminal code, okay, about terrorism and how the criminal code defines terrorism. 8301B. An act or omission in or outside Canada that is committed in whole or in part for a, now pay attention to the language here, a political, religious, or ideological purpose, objective or cause, and in whole or in part with the intention of intimidating the public or a segment of the public with regard to its security, including economic security, or compelling a person, a government, or a domestic or international organization to do or refrain from doing any act, whether the public or the person, government, or organization is inside, outside Canada, that intentionally causes death or serious bodily harm by the use of violence. That's how the criminal law in this country defines terrorism. Okay. So think about what this person in London, Ontario is accused of doing. Okay. Running down people on a sidewalk, in a pickup truck, in a deliberate attack on people of a particular faith. Sounds like a terror attack to me. What do you think? 750-1310. Your phone call's next on The Rob Snow Show on City News.
Well, we're celebrating our 43rd year. It's still family operated. We're in our second generation. We, pre-COVID, we're at about 1,000 employees. We have 20 stores from coast to coast in Canada. We do our own manufacturing. Right here in Ottawa, we have about 160 people that support Canadian-made manufacturing in addition to our retail stores. Taking you back to mid-March and the impact of the pandemic on Lee Valley. Lee Valley was actually in a tough spot. We had just launched our website a few months prior to that, and we were going through, a fairly typical deployment dive where your customers retract as they adjust to the website. And then under stress already, this pandemic hit. And in the early days, it was pretty critical. It hit us really hard. Stores were closed. We weren't sure what to do, so we had to go right into survival mode. As a result, we had to take our workforce almost back to half of where we were at because the stores were closed, and with 20 stores, that's a big retail workforce. But what we were able to do pretty quickly, with a little luck, being essential, selling tools and hardware, we were able to adjust our business model, with respect to the stores and our fulfillment operation. That new website that we were under stress worked out well for us because as the world was under house arrest, people were looking to online, and the conversion to our online sales in some cases almost doubled. And we saw tremendous interest in things to do at home. Where we were lucky once again and fortunate is that our product offering. Work at home tools, craft, hobbies, backyard, container gardening, you name it. What we sold was really appealing to people. With respect to our stores, Lee Valley, a rare unknown fact was that we were one of the pioneers of curbside pickup. We've been doing it for 25 years. Pretty much dove right into the application to help with the contactless shopping right away. We took the application, and it's not like a Apple application where you have to download it to your phone and clutter up your phone. This is literally resides right on our website. So you walk into our store with your phone, you pull up our website, and there's a little scan icon. You just tap that, select your store, off you go. You go through the showroom, you scan product, you can read more about it, you can check the on hand, you can add it to your cart, continue to shop, and when you're ready, you just submit it to the counter. We'll go pick it for you. We'll call out your name, we'll check you out, send you on your way. You haven't touched anything. It's completely safe, and it's using a device you're comfortable with and a website that you're familiar with. Amazingly, 9 out of 10 people that used it loved it and want to use it again.
Talk back
on The Rob Snow Show.
Have your say and call now.
613-750-1310.
The leader of the opposition, the leader of the Conservative Party, Aaron O'Toole, is in the House of Commons now. He has already called this, in his speech just moments ago, called this event in London a brutal act of terror. This is the Conservative leader.
This country, a country where it's safe to walk outside.
Over the last year, we've become more separated from one another. Police services have warned of a dramatic increase in hate crime, violent extremism, Islamophobia, and other signs of intolerance from one part of our country to another. It feels like we're having conversations in grief and fighting intolerance more and more. And as hard as that is, it is important for us to shine light collectively to fight against the darkness. It's important that we measure the distance between the Canada that we have and the Canada that we want. But it's more important for us to not just recognize the distance between those Canadas, but to conquer the distance, Mr. Speaker. Quand nous parlons d'une société.
When we talk about a society where everyone is free to practice their faith...
10:19, Rob Snow Show, Talkback Hour, 750-1310. We're talking about the event in London, Ontario, the attack in London, Ontario. I'm asking you, do you think it rises to the level of a terrorist attack? People are calling it a terrorist attack. I've read you the relevant language from the criminal code. We're going to have an expert coming up on these very matters later in the program, in the 11 o'clock hour. When you think about it, did this person allegedly do this because he was motivated by a certain political worldview or a religious viewpoint or because of a particular ideology? Why else would someone do this, right? And what was the intent if not to intimidate the public? Try to make people feel, quote unquote, insecure. That's the language that's in the criminal code. Threaten the security. I've heard that a lot in some of our newscasts since this became news yesterday afternoon. People saying in London, I feel afraid. I've never felt afraid before in London, Ontario. I've never felt afraid to walk down the street as a Muslim in London, Ontario before, and now I feel afraid. I never thought this could happen here. I don't feel safe here anymore. Well, if that's the case, it would seem, doesn't that qualify as an act of terror? As an act of terror? To terrorize? I would like to know, what you think. 750-1310. It's so sad. It's so very, very sad. Child orphaned. You've got this young fellow, for some reason, allegedly decided to do this. He's probably just thrown his life away. And for what? A nicer place you will not find, London, Ontario. Was it a terror attack? To me, no question it meets the definition of a terror attack. I'd like to know what you think. 750-1310. Roger, thank you for calling, sir.
Good morning, Rob.
Morning. Yeah.
First of all, my sincere and deep condolences to the family and the Muslim community.
Sure, well said.
I don't... You know, the hatred that's in this country, it just kind of blows me away. You know, like people not realize that we're all have the same aspirations. We all have blood. We all eat. We drink. We have to breathe. And because we have different pigments of skin or we have different religious aspirations, we're all the same people. We're human beings. And this act, to me, was an act of terror, and you explained it pretty good, Rob, and I'll just go on a little bit further.
Sure.
It's also an act of hatred, and the idea that this community now, and I was at London we used to play the fairs there years ago after the Ottawa exhibition when I was a young lad. Beautiful city, you know, and not a lot of crime in there, you know. It's obviously these people would feel terror, and if like myself, being targeted, because I'm a white, I'm French, and I'm Italian.
I mean, in the language in the code, it says, in whole or in part, with the intent of intimidating the public with regard to security. Okay?
No, Rob.
Right?
This is
it's very intimidating, right? You're intimidating an entire community.
And from what I understand, you know, the last several years, since 9/11, how many terrorist attacks did the Muslim community perpetrate on this country? I don't remember any, if there was. But, Rob, the big question here is, like, this country...
There were plots foiled.
Yes, there was.
Right. Chicago...
Yeah. The one there...
Toronto 18, Toronto 18, Via Rail terror plot, right?
The country is. It's the fact is we don't have any type of a system to punish people. Now, I heard yesterday about that woman in Thunder Bay, the First Nations, she was killed by...
somebody threw a trailer hitch at her. Yeah, 8 years in prison for that.
8 years in prison. So her life, I guess because she was the First Nation, her life doesn't amount to what somebody else's life should be. But back in the days of when Stephen Harper was Prime Minister, Rob, he put in legislation, and he went through the Senate and everything in the House. If you commit, say, a crime with a gun, whether it's a loaded
mandatory minimum,
5 years.
5 years.
And then the rest of the sentence goes on to there. There is no plea bargain by bleeding heart judges. Yeah. And what I'm getting at, Rob, is in this country, let's take another example. All these people that came back from Iraq and Syria, these so-called ISIS supporters.
Yeah, the sympathizers. Yeah.
Are those the same people that are being hired by the Chinese Communist government to terrorize Chinese Canadians in this country? There seems to be an awful lot of...
I don't know.
Well, Rob, you know what I'm finding? It seems to be a pretty laid-back attitude about the minorities in this country being targeted. And this government does not believe in law and order because, of course, they want to they change the justice system there for S&P Lavalin and anything to suit themselves because maybe they'll...
But to the question, because we're kind of jumping all over the place here.
Yes, I know, Rob, but it all entails the same damn thing, you know?
Okay.
We need a system that there is... The law has teeth and there is consequences.
Gotcha. Okay, Roger. Thank you. Yep.
Thank you.
Yep. I understand, sir. I understand. Law and order. You think... we're not tough enough, and I've heard that before. Cameron, downtown. Good morning, Cameron.
Good morning, Rob. How are you?
I'm good, sir. Thank you. The situation in London, Ontario, okay, you have an entire family, save a 9-year-old, is wiped out because of their identity, because of their faith. Is that a terror attack, in your opinion?
I would say that's terrorism.
Yeah.
Let me unpack this real quick, okay?
Okay.
I can't even begin to try to imagine what that 9-year-old child has going through his mind right now. I'm a father. I have a 6-year-old, and I'm trying to figure out what my kid thinks about sometimes. But I mean, this child right there, imagine what this kid is what he is thinking about right now. This guy that did this murder is a terrorist, flat out.
Okay.
But let me just turn the coin, and I'm not trying to trivialize or make anything here.
All right.
Justin Trudeau calls out the attack on the Muslims here as a terrorist attack.
Yes.
And as despicable, and it is.
Yes, it is. Yeah.
Why is he not calling the same behavior on the Uyghurs?
Well, that's he's taken how should we say? A very nuanced approach to labeling what's happening to the Muslim minority in China as a genocide. It's a very good point that you make there, Cameron.
So
absolutely,
it's good if Muslims die outside of mainland China, but we'll turn our head and look away because of my buddy jeeping. Oh, I don't want to piss him off, though. You know.
Yeah. Okay. Cameron, it's a very valid point that you raise. It's a very valid point that you raise.
That kid, I feel so bad for that child.
Yeah. Okay.
Oh, my God.
Yeah,
that kid's life is basically ruined.
Yeah, it's terrible. It's terrible. All right, Cameron, thank you. Thank you. Yeah, that's an interesting take by Cameron, as usual. Thank you for calling in. Okay, halfway point. When we come back, I believe Mr. Singh is going to speak in the House of Commons as we listen to some of the party leaders make some remarks publicly in the House, in Parliament, on the events that unfolded Sunday in London. And we'll take your calls, 750-1310, and we'll introduce, after halftime, some new topics as well. I want to talk about the reopening, want to talk about second doses as well. The mayor frustrated on my program this morning with the supply of vaccine for Ottawa. So that's all ahead here on the Rob Snow Show Talkback Hour on City News.
one for local news in Ottawa and the Valley. This is City News, now on 101.1 FM and 1310 AM.
It's Tuesday, June 8th. Good morning. I'm Andrew Boyle. Right now in Ottawa, 28, feeling like 37. It's 25 in Smiths Falls and feels like 32. Here's what's making news this hour. The Prime Minister says we cannot become desensitized to violence like the attack on a family in London, Ontario, Sunday night. Justin Trudeau in the House of Commons says the jokes, the toxic rhetoric and the like cannot be allowed to take root. He says Canadians are outraged and many Muslim Canadians are scared. Trudeau says it is up to non-Muslim Canadians to understand the fear Muslims live with and confront racism at all levels. Conservative leader Aaron O'Toole, NDP leader Jagmeet Singh and Bloc leader Yves-François Blanchet, all echoing those sentiments and also calling attention to the 9-year-old survivor who is now an orphan. A vigil will be held tonight in London at the site where a person at the wheel of that truck ran over that family out for an evening stroll, killing 4 and leaving that 9-year-old. He continues to recover in hospital. Ontario reporting 469 new cases today of COVID-19. 13 of them are in Ottawa. There is 1 new case in Renfrew, but no new cases in Leeds, Grenville, Lanark, or the Eastern Ontario Health Unit. City News Time at 10:32. I'm Andrew Boyle. For News Anytime, follow up online at ottawa.citynews.ca.
Talk back.
Hello. On the Rob Snow Show. The phone lines are open at 613-750-1310.
Now, the Rob Snow Show continues.
Mr. Singh, Jagmeet Singh, the leader of the Democrats, in the House right now, in the House of Commons.
Nothing has happened. There have been so many lives lost, and people are frustrated. So what can we do? One, acknowledge that this is a reality that we have to deal with. This is Canada. This is a part of the country we live in. We've got to deal with it. We can't deny it. We can't ignore it. We have to confront it. This is a part of the country that we live in. We've got to find a way to make things safer for people. We have to acknowledge that the real and urgent threat to Canadians' safety, these are Canadians, the real and urgent threat to Canadian safety is coming from hate, is coming from extreme right-wing ideology, it's coming from white supremacy, it's coming from hate groups that are expounding this type of hatred and radicalizing people. That is the real threat to Canadians' lives right now. So something's got to change. There's got to be resources placed to address the real and urgent threats to Canadians' lives. It is not coming from other places. It's coming from Canada, and it's coming from people radicalized to hate people who look different, who pray differently. That is the real threat that Canadians are facing. So then someone's got to listen to this and acknowledge that if that's the real threat, then resources have to be put towards addressing this real threat. We know, and this is a harsh reality, politicians have used Islamophobia for political gain. They have. They have used it as a divisive tool. That has to end. No one can ever use Islamophobia for a political gain. And we all know when it's been done. We all know how it's happened. And I'm not saying that it's solely those politicians who have used Islamophobia for political gain who are to blame. Absolutely not. But you are surely a part of the problem. If you have used Islamophobia for political gain, thinking I can divide people and get votes, this is the result of it. This is what happens when you divide people. You inflame hatred and people die. That's what happens. We need to tackle online hate. It is a real thing. Online hate is radicalizing people. Online hate is spreading messages that teach people to hate and create this fear of the other. We know that is happening, and we have to be serious about tackling it. Something has to change. It can't just continue. Another life can't be lost, and we do nothing about it. Another family can't be mauled down in the streets and nothing happens.
What happened was an act of violence and terrorism and hate. We need to confront hatred head on. What happened was senseless and It defies understanding, but we have to do something. We have to act. We have to make decisions. We have to do something to put an end to hate and to this kind of violence.
We decide to do something different as a country, where we come together and say we are going to put an end to hatred. We're going to put an end to violence. We're not going to allow political leaders to use this type of divisive hatred to gain political points. That has to end. That can't continue. We have to be serious about this. And to all the Muslim community right now in Canada that are suffering right now, that are feeling pain right now, I feel your pain. I understand your pain. And we are going to work towards making sure that you do not have to live in fear, that you do not have to walk the streets in fear. We are going to fight for you. Merci.
Okay, that's Mr. Singh, Jagmeet Singh, leader of Canada's New Democrats in the House of Commons, live here on City News. This is the Rob Snow Show. Talk back hour, 750-1310. Mr. Singh called it an act of terror, said it was an act of terror. Mr. O'Toole said it was an act of terror. I didn't hear Mr. Blanchette, the bloc leader. And I'm not sure if Mr. Trudeau said the word terror or terrorism or anything along those lines, but we did join the Prime Minister's remarks a little bit late. So I won't say that he didn't use the word, but there are calls for this individual in London, the accused in this case, to be charged with a terror offense. And I'm asking if you think that this was an act of terrorism. I think it says in our criminal law, when you read the language of the criminal law, I think you can make a very compelling case that this was an act of terrorism. An act committed in whole or in part for a political, religious, ideological purpose with the intention of intimidating the public with regard to its security that intentionally causes death or serious bodily harm by the use of violence. That's my abbreviated, edited version of the language in the criminal code. It would seem to meet all the qualifications of a terror attack. Okay, Cormac McSweeney, our parliamentary correspondent, has just said that Mr. Trudeau did call it a terrorist attack. Okay. So there you have it. The three main party leaders have said a terrorist attack. Yes, 750-1310. Mohammed, Ottawa, thank you for waiting, sir. Good morning.
Yeah, good morning, Rob. I'm an avid listener of the show, but this is the first time that I've called.
Well, I appreciate it, sir. Thank you. Was this a terrorist attack, sir?
Well, yeah, I think it is. It smells like terrorism. It looks like terrorism. I think you laid down the facts about the criminal aspects of this, and I agree with you 100% that it's a terrorist act. I just want to add that I have never called, but today, as you can tell from my name, I'm a Muslim. I live here in Ottawa.
Yeah.
This attack came very close. It hit very close to home.
Sure.
Yesterday, when the story broke out, the first thing I did was I forwarded the message to my kids and my wife, and because they, like that family who were just going for a stroll in the evening, they do that on a regular basis here in Ottawa.
Oh, they do, yeah.
So I thought probably I just give them heads up that this has happened, and that they should probably look over their shoulders and just see what is going on around them and that kind of thing.
Yeah. Now, Mohammed, let me ask you: you ever felt like that before? That insecurity like that you?
I did.
Yeah. Okay.
I did, and because but what happens is that if you feel the fear and then the hurt and stuff like that, but then time is the best healer. So when that kind of story fades away, you come back to your normal self, and then and just go about by your life. But these things have been happening in Canada. We knew that for the last maybe 4 years they have gained ground, and probably propelled by what happened in the States, but also in Canada. We shouldn't be surprised that these things are not happening, because we had the Bill 21 in Quebec. We had and the People's Party headed by
Max Bernier. Yeah.
at Espernier. We had the Brexit, the Brexit movement that was amplified by the election in Alberta. So things were sort of coming.
You think it's been under the surface?
Exactly.
Okay, all right.
So
I guess when I wonder about this 20 years old, according to the news reports. If he had any run-ins with law enforcement, it was kind of like little stuff.
Right.
Kind of an introverted guy, played a lot of video games, made a lot of noise at night playing video games. The thing is now you can be part of an online. You can be a loner or an introvert, but you can be radicalized online, be part of an online community, right? So you don't feel like you're alone kind of thing anymore.
Like I said yesterday when I shared that information, that story with my family, my daughter, who goes to Ottawa U, sent me a very quick message and she said, Dad, I hope that they do not invoke the mental health issue now and say that this was done this person was this and that kind of thing.
Yeah, like with the van attack in Toronto, for example.
Exactly.
Autism made me do it, or whatever.
Yeah,
right.
exactly.
Okay.
Well,
Mohammed, I thank you for calling, sir. And gosh, it's just such a sad story. It's so it's terrible. It's terrible.
It is, but I'm glad that you're talking about it, and I'm glad that you have your heart on the right place. So thank you so much too.
Thank you, Mo. Bye. Yeah. Okay. 750-1310, 750-1310, 613-750-1310. Was it a terrorist attack? Dean in Orleans. Good morning.
Good morning, Rob.
Yeah.
I'm kind of divided on this one.
Why would you be divided on it? What are you struggling with?
Just because it's so early on, and how much information do we really have? I think we're jumping to assumptions or conclusions.
Well, I have said he's a suspect. He is alleged to have done this. Okay.
Alleged, yes.
Yeah, but if he didn't do it, I mean, let's assume he was behind the wheel of the truck, right? What's in doubt, really?
I have a question. Would we be considering this terrorism if he had ran into a different group of people, maybe a group of people that maybe not a part of sort of a minority?
Well, I would ask the question the same way I'm asking it now. Did this individual do it because this is the language in the criminal code, for a political purpose, a religious purpose, or an ideological purpose?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah. To intimidate the public, to make them feel public insecure, that intentionally, with the intent of causing death or serious bodily harm, because that's the language in the code.
On the surface, I'd probably agree with you, on the terrorist, but on the terrorist, intentions.
Yeah.
But we should also consider the fact that it might have, there's always a possibility that it has nothing to do with any of those things as well.
Okay.
That this person just
snapped.
Yeah, exactly. To me, there's always a possibility of that until we go through the whole process.
Right.
But yes, and on the surface, of course, it looks
bad. It looks bad. Yeah.
Can I bring up another thing? I don't know. This
sure.
Okay. You might. I don't know. You mightn't like what I'm gonna say, but I find now, in the media, like throughout the media, the narrative is that this was a hate crime, a specific Muslim attack. Like,
well,
how do we know that?
Wasn't it? Well, look who's been victimized here. Who's been victimized here? Well, why would the police say it was a targeted attack?
Yeah.
What would lead the police to believe that?
The police chief said that, and that was it. He alleged.
Yeah.
He alleged. He just alleged. He doesn't have any. He doesn't offer up any allegations or any proof.
Well, he came out and said that probably about 15 or 16 hours after the incident, right? And you can bet after the worst mass murder in London, Ontario's history, that the police chief of London, Ontario is probably pretty in tune with what his officers are telling him. Right.
I mean, usually police are pretty circumspect, even really hesitant to describe any sort of motive, especially that quick after any sort of crime.
Mm-hmm.
But in this case, the officer making the announcement, just said, "Oh yeah, this is what it was. This is what it was." Usually, they.
But what else could it be? What else?
Anything.
Okay, yeah. What else could it be, though?
Could it be? Is there such thing as a random attack? Let me offer this. What if the family were not a visible? I'm not trying to dismiss the incident,
right?
Or the tragedy of it. I mean, I can't imagine.
Yeah.
What if the family were not a visible minority, and the same thing happened? Would we be saying it's a Catholic attack, or these people were Buddhist, but we don't know? Would we be saying that sort of thing? That's a hate attack.
It's about the perpetrator's intent as well. Right? It's about the perpetrator's intent.
We had no idea what that was.
Right?
So I just find we're so quick to jump to, because it's a certain group that...
Fair enough, sir. If you think we're moving too fast, it's a rush to judgment, that's certainly a fair criticism.
Yeah, that's my point. Yeah,
all right.
Rush to judgment.
Fair enough, Dean. Thank you. In Orleans. Be right back. Final quarter. A couple of phone lines there, 750-1310. Talkback, it's a heavy-duty one today. Yes, it is. Sometimes that's the news, and it ain't pretty. This is the Rob Snow Show, City News.
Everyone's got their own little dreams. I want to write the next novel. I want to write a screenplay, which I still want to do. So owning my own business is something I've always, in the back of your mind, oh yeah, that'd be really cool to try and do. I end up lost my job that I had for 20 years. And I found myself with nothing, trying to figure out what am I going to do now. I'm mid-40s and, I got a lot of different experience, mainly in retail. So I figured, you know what, let's try to give this a go. I didn't really have any money. I started up with the little website. We went with that, and then it's kind of just grown from there. I have such a passion for this, it's not even work for me. This is a hobby that I get to, thankfully make a living off of. When you walk in, you're going to be overwhelmed, I think, with all the amount of licensed product that we have. I only sell licensed product. I don't sell anything no name or anything. Everything is 100% officially licensed, depending on the franchise. So I like to support a lot of different franchises, a lot of pop culture. So I do have a little bit of music, vinyl, Star Trek, Star Wars, Marvel, DC, Doctor Who, Game of Thrones, you name it. There's probably something around, or if I don't have it, you let me know and I'll do whatever I can to, try and find it for you. I do some comic books. A lot of the interesting things that I do are items that you just don't find anywhere else. I probably have the best selection of pop culture cookbooks. So cookbooks from Walking Dead and Downton Abbey and Orange is the New Black, Hannibal, Marvel, Wonder Woman. I've got the best selection of Star Trek ships in the city. Well, actually, I've got the best selection in the country. I'm the only retailer in Canada that deals directly with the company Eagle Moss. I've got the best variety of Pop Funko figures within the city. I got the best prices, hands down. Even some of my action figures that I sell that are available at Walmart and Toys R Us, I'm cheaper than them, which is a lot of times you don't realize it. So even that small business can offer you a great value.
To talk back
on the Rob Snow Show.
Have your say and call now.
613-750-1310.
The attack in London, Ontario on Sunday night has pretty much taken over the talkback hour right now. This was, we have some audio of Mr. Trudeau in, oh, you don't have that? No? Okay, all right, never mind, David. Mr. Trudeau, Mr. Singh, Mr. O'Toole, all the federal party leaders called this a terror attack. It was a terror attack. What happened in London, Ontario, running down people on a sidewalk in a pickup truck, a deliberate attack on people of a particular faith, which sounds very much like a terror attack to me. And again, Phil Gurski is our expert in matters like this, and he's going to join us on our program just after, around 11:15 or so, here on the Rob Snow Show. Did this person allegedly do this because he was motivated by some sort of political viewpoint or a particular religious viewpoint or a particular ideology? Because that's what it says in our criminal code. What was his intent? If not to cause death or serious bodily harm or intimidate the public, to make people insecure. I heard it on the news repeatedly this morning. I can't believe this happened here in London, Ontario. I don't feel safe anymore in London, Ontario. London, Ontario, like Western Ontario, mid-sized city, just incredible quality of life, affluence, beautiful, beautiful part of the province. And this, it's unimaginable that this would happen. Last year, the city of London, Ontario, 4 murders all year. And now this on Sunday. But is it terrorism? That's what I would like you to weigh in on at 750-1310. Marie in the West End. Good morning, Marie.
Yes, good morning, Robin. Nice to have you back.
Thank you.
I believe that it was a terrorist attack, and I'm just doing the breaking news here, and it says the Prime Minister said it was a terrorist attack, not a terror attack.
Right.
But I think that it was. I really do. I think that this is my own personal opinion, of course, but I think that he probably watched and saw them, that they went for walks all the time. But what I don't understand is how a 20-year-old boy or man would do this, knowing that for the rest of his life, if found criminally guilty, he's going to spend the rest of his life behind bars. Yeah. I don't understand that, but I do believe it was a terrorist attack. I agree with the police chief in London. I don't think he would have said what he said if he was wearing body armor
at the time. A news report says he was wearing body armor when they took him into custody.
Well, there you go. If that's true, what else could we assume that he had done? But before I go, Rob, I'd just like to say that my heart just breaks for that young boy in the hospital. It's what he's going to have to face, whether he knows it now or he will when he wakes up or whatever. That he has no family left, family left
no
whatsoever.
Family left. Yeah.
So,
very sad, isn't it?
I agreed. I think it was a terrorist attack. I think it was planned, and I just he gets
your heart breaks. I can hear it, Marie. You're choking up a bit this morning. Yeah.
Yes. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Marie. Yeah. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Okay. Craig in Chelsea. Good morning, Craig. You're on City News.
Hey, Rob. I just I want to call in and say, it's definitely a terror attack.
Okay.
I mean, no doubt about it. I mean, if I was Muslim and living in London area, I would feel afraid. So I think that meets my definition of a terror attack.
Sure. Well, we took a call from our longtime listener, Muhammad, who said he texted his family members yesterday, said they go out for walks all the time in Ottawa. He just told them, look out, be extra careful. What is that if not instilling insecurity, right? A sense of terror in a community, right? Absolutely.
Completely agree. So I just want to mention one other thing, if you have a second.
Sure.
I thought Jagmeet Singh's condemnation of people using I can't recall his exact words, for political purposes. Was interesting in that I think the NDP spoke a little bit about Bill 21 in Quebec and said they didn't agree with it, but I thought
nobody's fighting against Bill 21 in Quebec. Nobody.
Was a little happen. So anyway,
they're all cowards when it comes to Bill 21 in Quebec.
Yeah.
Just like they're all cowards. They're all cowards when it comes to anything Premier Legault does in Quebec. You know, a few years ago it's Bill 21, and now it's Bill 96. Where are these federal leaders? Are there any federalists in Ottawa willing to stand up to nationalists and hardcore secularists in Quebec? Show me one. I can't find one. Jody Wilson-Raybould, that's about it.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you, Craig.
Thank you.
Good point. Bye. Yeah. In Gatineau, is it Karan?
It's Karan, yes.
Yes. Go ahead, sir. Thank you for calling. Do you think this was a terrorist attack?
Yeah, so I'm just going to share a little story and I'll answer your question.
Sure.
We just moved to a small town in Gatineau area, and yesterday we had a kind of a racist incident. Maybe not. Doesn't really matter.
Okay.
This morning I heard about the London car accident. Terrible news happened in London. Didn't put two together. After which I went for my morning run, and as I'm running on a fairly busy highway, like a local highway, all I can think about is, we just moved here. I'm a brown person. I have a bushy beard. Like, all it takes is, I don't know the people around here, you know? And all I could think about is, what if someone runs me over now because I'm a brown person running in small town Quebec? And if that isn't the definition of being terrorized, then I don't know what is. So to answer your question, yes, this was an act of terrorism. And I'm sure the people...
What's the motivation? What's the motivation? Is it to instill fear, insecurity? You certainly feel insecure now, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah, so what do you call it then, right? Yeah.
Terrorism.
Yeah. Thank you, Karen. Thank you. Yeah, thanks a lot for the conversation this morning. Therapeutic for me in some ways. This is the Rob Snow Show on City News.
news in Ottawa and the Valley. This is City News, now on 101.1 FM and 1310 AM.
It's Tuesday, June 8th. Good morning. I'm Andrew Boyle. Right now in Ottawa, 28 degrees. It feels like 37. 25 in Smiths Falls, feeling like 32. And here's what's making news in Ottawa and the Valley. House of Commons pay tribute to the victims of the attack in London Sunday evening, with the Prime Minister and other federal leaders addressing Canadians.
Prime Minister Justin Trudeau began his speech saying the killing of 4 members of the same family and the attempted murder of a 9-year-old boy was no accident.
This was a terrorist attack motivated by hatred in the heart of one of our communities.
Trudeau says these people were targeted because of their faith, and he calls on all Canadians to do better in rejecting hatred and terror, saying we can't let them take root in our society.
Because the consequences can be far too serious. We've seen it in Christchurch. We've seen it in other places around the world, and we've lived it here at home.
The Prime Minister is vowing to do all he can to fight discrimination and take more action to dismantle far-right groups like the Proud Boys. Conservative leader Aaron O'Toole also calling on Canadians to do better, citing a quote from the Quran.
Good and evil are not equal. Repel evil with good and be patient.
Cormac McSweeney, Parliament Hill.
Now, there are a couple of vigils that are planned for this evening, one in London, the site of those tragic deaths, and also a vigil being held this evening at 7 o'clock. That will be at the Human Rights Monument on Elgin. Now your forecast with meteorologist Jill Taylor.
Heat warning continues for Ottawa, the Valley, and Smiths Falls today. Mainly cloudy, scattered showers and thunderstorms, especially this afternoon. High 31 will feel like 39 with the humidity. Tonight, cloudy and 20, and tomorrow, sun and cloud, the high 29. For today, the high 31.
And right now, 28 degrees in Ottawa, feeling like 37. Smiths Falls, 25, and it does feel like 32. Ottawa Mayor Jim Watson has requested an additional 40,000 doses of COVID-19 vaccine from the province to calm a surging demand and help ensure all Ottawans are fully vaccinated by fall. Here's City News reporter Alex Gouge.
Mayor Jim Watson feels whenever the province lowers eligibility age without properly increasing supply, it causes a frenzy over securing an appointment in Ottawa. He tells the Rob Snow Show why it was necessary to request the additional 40,000 doses.
It's time to level the playing field and make sure that we in Ottawa get our fair share of doses so we can get people double vaccinated by September.
Watson is also pleased with the province bumping up its Step 1 reopening date to Friday, but is urging residents to be cautious when venturing out. He says Ottawans don't need to all rush to get a patio seat on the very first day restrictions are eased. Alex Gouge, City News.
City News time, 11:03. Now, Ontario is reporting 469 new cases of COVID-19 today. 13 of these are in Ottawa. There is one in Renfrew, but there are no new cases today in either Leeds, Grenville, Lanark, or the Eastern Ontario Health Unit. Now, the test positivity rate is at 2.7%. Out of the 17,500 tests that were done, the province is also reporting 18 more deaths. A burn ban is now in effect in Ottawa. Went into effect at 8:30 this morning. The Ottawa Fire Service says this is a complete ban on open fires, extending to those who even have their burn permit. The burn ban applies to everything from brush to campfires to wood-burning outdoor fireplaces. Not included in the ban, things like barbecues and natural gas outdoor fireplaces. Ottawa police have not released many details on reports of a flasher in the East End, but 2 incidents making the round on social media. Now, police say the description of the man and the vehicle involved are very similar. On social media, the 2 reports, a man driving a black pickup truck in the Orleans Wood and Fallingbrook area, exposing himself. I'm Andrew Boyle for News Anytime. Follow up online at ottawa.citynews.ca.
The world is changing.
So keep up with Rob.
The Rob Snow Show returns on Rogers TV and City News, 101.1 FM and 1310 AM.
Yesterday it was reported in the Globe and Mail an update on the detention of the 2 Michaels, Michael Koberg, Michael Spavor, held as hostages by the Chinese government in retaliation for the detention of Meng Wanzhou, the Huawei executive. She's fighting extradition to the United States right now. And Bob Fife and Steve Chase reported in the Globe yesterday that our ambassador to China, Mr. Burton, Dominic Burton, spent 3 weeks in Washington in early April holding talks with senior American officials aimed at facilitating the release of the Canadian hostages. So let's get some reaction to some of this news from Charles Burton, senior fellow at the Macdonald Laurier Institute's Centre for Advancing Canada's Interests Abroad and a former counselor at the Canadian Embassy in Beijing. Good morning.
Good morning, Rob.
What do you think Mr. Burton was up to in Washington?
Well, the whole thing, of course, is very, very weird and irregular.
Okay.
The idea that the government of Canada would pull the ambassador from, accredited to China for many weeks and then send him to engage in diplomacy in a country to which he is not accredited over a long period. 3 weeks in Washington is quite a long time. Doing we're not exactly sure what, but it appears trying to convince the Americans to come up with some means to effect the release of Meng Wanzhou. So the question really is whether the ambassador was, assisting the Chinese regime in preventing Miss Meng from being extradited to the Eastern District of New York State, where, facing very serious charges of fraud, maybe she would go state's evidence and provide information about any relationship her company Huawei might have with Chinese military and security agencies. One wonders also whether Mr. Burton, while in Washington meeting with the Department of Justice, might have other concerns, because his company, McKinsey, when he was a senior official there, is facing some response over corruption scandals in South Africa and Turkey, Saudi Arabia, and Ukraine.
Okay.
We just don't know. And I
but
feel
strange. You think it's all strange, Charles? You think it's strange?
Yeah, I just don't understand. If Mr. Trudeau felt that Global Affairs Canada and the Canadian Embassy in Washington was not doing an adequate job in representing our concerns over Kovrigan's favor, why wouldn't he appoint, say, a special envoy on this? Why would he pull the ambassador out, who was then not present in China when Kovrigan's favor had their trial? That's when we first noticed that he wasn't there. And it just isn't consistent with his role as an ambassador to be engaged in this kind of activity, and I don't see the reason for it.
And why couldn't Canada's ambassador to the United States be working the diplomatic channels in the United States? That's strange too, right?
Yes, of course. There's something about Global Affairs and the ambassador that they feel that they're better off bringing in an ambassador accredited to another place. But as I say, if they felt that they didn't have sufficient manpower in Washington, Mr. Trudeau could appoint a special envoy to pursue this matter alone. The bottom line is this is not that complicated. It's really a question of, can the United States negotiate some kind of deferred prosecution agreement that would allow Ms. Meng to return to China without facing jail time in the United States.
Yeah. And what do you think the likelihood of that is?
Very low.
Really?
Huawei is not prepared to acknowledge any culpability in the matter and pay a fine. I think they're hoping that the Canadian government will give in to pressure to terminate this extradition hearing before she gets to the States. And I would say I think that sending Mr. Burton there to negotiate with the American government, in effect on what could be seen as on behalf of the Chinese government, only emboldens the Chinese government to keep holding Mr. Kovrig in Mr. favor for a longer period of time, as clearly that's working for them in terms of achieving their overall goal of getting Meng, not heading to the U.S. where she would have to testify under oath.
Okay. Why do you say it emboldens? the Chinese regime?
Well, I mean, the message we would like to be sending to China is that their hostage diplomacy of Michael Kovrig and Michael's favor is bad for their overall international relations. And Canada, should be providing some sort of incentive to the Chinese regime to release them through sanctions or other measures that indicate to the Chinese government that hostage diplomacy has costs. What we've done instead is give the Chinese what they want from this political coercion, which is going to great measures to try and effect the release of Ms. Meng by getting the Americans to withdraw their charges against her or come up with some sort of plea bargain. So, if I was in Beijing, I'd be looking at it and saying, let's not release Kovrig and favor anytime soon, because if we do that, then we won't have the Canadians pressuring the Americans over the Meng matter.
Okay. This was part of the reporting in the Globe and Mail yesterday. A source said Mr. Barton's overall mission was to, quote, convince the Biden administration to use its influence and garner support from other allies to persuade President Xi Jinping that China's global image is being badly tarnished as a result of Beijing's hostage diplomacy. Do you think the Chinese leadership cares that, or even believes that its global image is being tarnished?
Well, of course, Kovrig and favor hostage diplomacy is not the only one. I mean, the Australian Fang Hongjun is also being held under similar circumstances, and one doesn't see the Canadian government standing up much to help out Australia in that regard. So I think certainly, the Chinese government recently, Mr. Xi made a speech complaining about, how the propaganda work being done by Chinese diplomats and media outlets is not showing China as a lovable and credible and responsible member of the global community. So I don't think it's a question that China feels they should be doing anything differently, but that they should be somehow packaging it in a way which will cause public opinion not to fall to the kind of incredible lows that we're seeing with regard to Canadian support for our government's engagement in China, which is, down there sort of 10-15%, as opposed to most people thinking that we're not standing up sufficiently for our Canadian values and sovereignty and security. So I think from that point of view, the wolf warrior diplomacy and China's arbitrary use of non-tariff barriers to put economic pressure on places and this hostage diplomacy to try and influence our judicial process with regard to Ms. Meng is a policy that China finds is working for them, and the fact that it causes people to start squawking about how they're not abiding by the rules of the international rules-based order is clearly not having much impact on them. In other words, they know what's going on. We've told them this many, many times. I don't see that there's going to be anything but Canada actually making a substantive response to what China's doing to send out the message that there are costs to this kind of behavior. But we have not done that over the 910 days that Kovrig and favor have been held, and our government continues to say that their method of trying to get them out of their prison hell is the best one, and that they're working that they're working behind the scenes and making progress. Well, 910 days is an awfully long time to be making extremely slow progress, as far as I can make out.
The U.S. Department of Justice has the power to withdraw the extradition request. What do you think the likelihood is of that?
I mean, virtually zero. I just don't see them doing that because they haven't so far. And, in our own case, our Justice Department could also...
say, we'll go. we're not going to do it.
And stop Justice Heather Holmes' careful consideration of the whether or not Ms. Meng qualifies under the extradition treaty. Neither side is prepared to give in to Chinese pressure in that way. I think with good reason, because it would then send the message to the Chinese authorities that if they behave in these appalling ways, that they can get what they want.
Okay. Thank you so much again, Charles Burton. Nice to hear from you again this morning.
Good to speak with you.
Yeah.
Take care.
That is Charles Burton from the Macdonald Laurier Institute. Former Counselor, Canadian Embassy in Beijing. Rob Snow Show, City News.
When you've lost your breasts, you've sort of lost part of yourself. And then all at once you're losing your hair. You don't know who you are anymore. You want to feel like yourself again. So I think that the store, a mastectomy store, is essential because you've lost your identity. And then all at once you're looking for a wig, you need a headscarf, you need a camisole. There's nowhere to go, there's no one to talk to. This should be essential because there are more and more women that are getting breast cancer. I think it's 1 in 6. They're becoming younger. I have a client that's 18 years old. And where do they go? They need a place like this that the women that work there understand. They know what you're going through. It's changed quite a bit. Our hours are different. We're now open from 10 to 5. We're not as busy as we were. A lot of women are afraid to go out. They're afraid that maybe there are more people in the store. So that's why I try and let them know you are alone. There's absolutely nobody in the store except you and I. If there is a woman that she's very afraid, I will lock the door to make sure nobody else comes in. I'll put a sign back in 10-15 minutes just to give her that reassurance. Before we would have 4, 5, 6 people in the store. We didn't have to turn anybody away. Now we do. Some clients do leave and they're upset because they're in the store. They said, you know, we drove 20 minutes and now we're not allowed in the store. And I try to make them understand that there's somebody in here that's going through chemo or radiation. So that's sort of changed a lot, that we're not able to have more people in the store.
If we're talking about products, there's the bras that are adapted for mastectomy. The bathing suits that are adapted to mastectomy. We have special camisoles as well, and post-surgery bras. And then we have, for women going through chemo, the wigs that we have a big selection in the store as well. We have scarves. Some women don't feel comfortable wearing a wig. They prefer to wear a scarf or a hat, so we have a huge selection of that as well. We offer compression garments as well. When you're going through a mastectomy, you might have lymphedema in your arms after a couple of years, and you have flare-ups. So we have the sleeves, the hand as well that can be covered. We show each other's our scar. We talk about the treatments, how we felt, and I guess that's what they're looking for here. That's what makes us special. We have an added value in this store. Besides everything that's in the store, that's a product that can handle any problem that a client might have. Me and Linda, we've been through. We know how it feels in our bodies.
The Rob Snow Show returns
on Rogers TV and City News 101.1 FM
and 1310 AM.
It's called Building Back Better. The opportunities for businesses in a post-COVID Ottawa. And it's a new report based on surveys with hundreds of local business leaders in Ottawa, is tracking their attitudes, their confidence in Ottawa's economy. And it's done by Welsch, LLP. It's called the Ottawa Business Growth Survey, and Welch's partners, Ottawa Board of Trade, Abacus Data, and the Ottawa Business Journal. And for more information on it this morning and how the outlook is looking, we're joined by Jim McConnery, managing partner, Welsch LLP, Chartered Professional Accountants. Good morning, Mr. McConnery.
Hi, Rob. How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
Excellent.
Well, how's it look? What's the outlook?
Rob, it's improving, and that was a great outline of the survey you provided, but we've been doing the survey now for 7 years, so there's an interesting benchmark when we track the sentiment of the business community over a number of years, and one key aspect of the survey is a measurement of the Business Confidence Index, and in general, how business leaders are feeling about the local economy. the benchmark would be 100, and we're always tracking how the business sentiment compares to that benchmark of 100. And not surprising, Rob, in the first 5 years of the survey, that business confidence index was always well above 100. It was as high as about 125 in 2017, and the notion that that business community is feeling pretty positive. And then not surprising, Rob, we did the survey last year. We're in the heart of the pandemic. The survey is running in March and April, and the business confidence index plummeted to 78. And I think that was an accurate reflection of how the business community was feeling at that point in time. There was a lot of uncertainty about what the pandemic meant for business, what it meant for the outlook. And now, more or less a year later, doing the forecast in March and April 2021, we bounced back. So the business confidence index in 2021 was 103. So a great improvement over where we were last year, still not up to the high water mark we were a few years ago, but just really a sense of optimism, right, that we presently turned the corner. The worst is behind us, and when we look forward, things look relatively positive for the business community.
Good. Yeah, it's interesting that you talk about 2017 and everybody thinks back to Ottawa and Canada 150 and all the enthusiasm, and La Machine is here and it's a big party. It was like the birthday party year.
Yes.
And the consumer confidence index for Ottawa, as measured by your firm, hits 125, and by the first half of the pandemic year, craters down to 78. But it has recovered significantly, so that's very good news.
Correct. A related takeaway, Rob, is the survey. We survey over 500 business leaders in the Ottawa economy, and we do break the survey down by sector. And not surprising, but definitely how you feel about where the economy is today and the outlook is highly dependent on the sector that the particular business is in.
Okay.
And that's the story, I think, of the pandemic, that it's affected so many businesses in different ways. So, for example, technology and construction have done relatively well over the last year. In some cases, businesses are doing better than they were in a pre-COVID environment. You know, when we think of Shopify as an example. And then other sectors of the economy, when we think about hospitality and retail, they've been hit so hard because the businesses in some cases have been shut down. So the business confidence is definitely positive when we think about where it is today, but there's definitely discrepancies depending on the sector of the economy. And I think that's been the story of the pandemic as well, Rob, that it's affected businesses in different ways. But ideally, those sectors of the economy that have struggled are also on track for improvement as things reopen as we move through 2021.
The whole remote work, office centricity is dead. Speaking of Shopify, I'm wondering how that is revealed in your survey data.
It's a great question, and it's part of the survey in a few different ways, Rob. One question of business leaders is what they anticipate will be their need for office space as we move forward, and in particular, do business leaders see the need for office space shrinking, staying the same, or expanding? And it's relatively divided, Rob. There would be 30% of the survey respondents anticipate that they'll probably need less regular business or office space in the future. 25% see it growing, and 40% see it staying the same. Whereas in a pre-COVID environment, I think you would have seen less of a preponderance of business leaders thinking that they'd have a shrinking office space environment, because in a lot of cases, businesses anticipate growing. I think we're also at a point, Rob, where businesses are still trying to ascertain, the impact of the pandemic, how it's changed the way we live and work, and what it means on a go-forward basis. We'd be an example at Welsch, where we're sort of in that period of trying to evaluate what this means for us and our office space on a long-term basis. So for now, we'd probably say that it would stay the same.
Okay.
We're probably not clear in our minds as to whether or not we'll see a smaller office footprint in the future. So I think things will play out over the next year or two.
I haven't seen some people in a year. It's pretty crazy, isn't it, to think about that? There are people who have not been to this building in a year.
That's right.
Have not even opened up their offices yet. So this idea that there were trends in place in business, in the workplace, digitization, the move to more, say, virtual commerce, this kind of thing, and that the pandemic accelerated all of these trends. Your business leaders that you surveyed, do they expect a deceleration, or are we still pressing the accelerator in Ottawa? What do you think?
It's a good question, and I think business leaders are still in the midst of, trying to ascertain what the changes that we've gone through in the last year mean in terms of work environment on a go-forward basis. I can imagine that some businesses are keen to get back to normal, and to a certain extent being able to be back in the office, the work environment, the retail environment means that businesses will operate the way they did in the past. But I also think there is an opportunity to take advantage of some of the key changes that have happened over the last year. And I think some of that change, Rob, will come from an employee perspective as well, because employees, I think, in some ways have liked some of the benefits and some of the opportunities that have come from a different work environment. In some cases, that's maybe less commuting time, maybe more flexible schedules in terms of when people work. So I think it's a bit of a juggling act from an employer perspective, a business perspective, as to how you accommodate, your customers, but also your workers, employees, and how and when they will want to work. And I think we'll get a better sense for that as things go forward. Yeah. One question we had in the survey was about how employees would plan to split their time in the future between home and office. 47% said they still anticipated being in a regular work office environment, whereas 49% said they probably prefer some opportunity to work at home at least part of the time. I don't think we asked that specific question in the past, but I'm sure that 49% of people wanting some opportunity to work from home is much higher than it would have been in prior years.
Okay. So on the mend, not quite back to normal, but very optimistic for the capital, right, Mr. McConnery?
I think so, Rob.
Yeah.
And we're seeing good economic indicators overall. I think there's a lot of pent-up demand. You've had consumers who drive the economy have been on the sidelines now for an extended period of time. For some people, that means they've accumulated savings. They're maybe in a better financial position they were before the COVID. And I think that translates positively when we think about the business economy in Ottawa, when we think about that retail environment in Ottawa, that you've got a lot of consumers who presumably are keen to be back in stores and restaurants. And I think that looks good for our local economy.
Great stuff. Jim McConnery, nice to hear from you with some good news about our local economy.
Rob.
Thank you again. Managing Partner, Welsch, LLP, Chartered Professional Accountants. We'll be right back. Mr. Ford, Premier Ford, is expected to address the media about what happened in London, Ontario, Sunday. Any moment now, probably sometime around 11:30. So we'll join that as well. Premier Ford with a brief statement. This is the Rob Snow Show on City News.
news in Ottawa and the Valley. This is City News, now on 101.1 FM and 1310 AM.
It's Tuesday, the 8th of June. Good morning. I'm Sarah Buchan. Right now, the heat warning remains in effect for a large swath of eastern Ontario and portions of western Quebec. In Ottawa, it's partly cloudy, 29 degrees, a humidex of 37. In Smiths Falls, 26 degrees under partly cloudy skies and a humidex of 35. Here's what's making news this hour. Prime Minister Justin Trudeau says the attack in London, Ontario that killed 4 members of a Muslim family and left 1 child in hospital was an attack of terrorism. After observing a moment of silence for the victims, Trudeau spoke in the House of Commons and called the incident a terrorist attack motivated by hatred. Police say a man intentionally drove a truck into a family who were out for a walk Sunday evening, and he targeted them because of their faith. Trudeau says he's horrified by the attack, and his government stands in solidarity with the victims' loved ones during this extremely difficult time. Police say a 20-year-old man is facing 4 counts of first-degree murder and 1 count of attempted murder, and he did not know the victims. A vigil for the victims of the attack in London, Ontario is planned for this evening in Ottawa. The Council of Canadian Muslim Women in Canada is organizing a vigil at the Human Rights Monument on Elgin. It will take place at 7 o'clock. And an online fundraiser acknowledged by the family and supported by the London Muslim Mosque and the National Council of Canadian Muslims has raised over $500,000. Provincial health officials report 13 new cases of COVID-19 in Ottawa out of 469 new cases across Ontario. There were 18 new deaths in the province due to the virus. Elsewhere locally, no new cases in Leeds, Grenville, Lanark. Public Health Ontario is reporting no new cases in Eastern Ontario. There was 1 new case in Renfrew County, and health units will update their numbers in the afternoon. I'm Sarah Buchan for News Anytime. Follow up online at ottawa.citynews.ca.
He's a pillar of community opinion.
The Rob Snow Show returns
on Rogers TV and City News.
101.1 FM
and 1310 AM.
So as Sarah just mentioned, Prime Minister Trudeau, Premier Ford will attend a vigil tonight in London, Ontario for 5 members of a Muslim family. Police say they were the victims of a deliberate attack. The vigil is going to be outside the London Muslim Mosque this evening. Premier Ford says the attack has left the province in mourning. 4 people died, 9-year-old boy in hospital. And as a result, Premier Ford has said all government events are canceled today, and they're going to allow the family and the community to grieve. We brought you some of the speeches by the federal political leaders in the previous hour from the House of Commons here on the Rob Snow Show. But let's get a little bit more into the actual on-the-grounds investigation and what would be involved in something like this. Phil Gurski is here. He's president and CEO of Borealis Threat and Risk Consulting. Good morning.
Good morning, Rob. How are you?
I'm okay. How are you?
Well, been better, I suppose.
Yes.
I'm a native of London, Ontario.
Oh, you are? Okay.
Yeah, I'm born and raised, so it kind of hits home.
Wow. I didn't know that about you, Mr. Gurski. Yeah. So, that does hit close to home. But it's amazing that something like that could happen in London, Ontario. But Ontario had 4 murders for the entire year last year, it said.
No, you're right. But, I want to remind your listeners that when I worked at CSIS, from 2001 to 2015, we dealt with a serious terrorist attack that took place in Algeria, of all places, that was carried out in part by 3 Londoners, 3 high school students who actually had converted to Islam, become Islamist extremists, and went to Algeria and killed 41 people. So,
wow.
Yeah, London is not normally known for that. I agree with that. It was a safe town when I was growing up there.
Right.
And it is, it's a disheartening, horrific, cowardly crime that was committed. And I think it strikes all of us as, what a wanton, unnecessary waste of life by this young man for reasons yet to be determined, I suppose.
Yeah. So suspected hate crime, London police say terrorism charges might be laid. Do you think this would rise to the level of a terror attack? Federal politicians use the term, it was an act of terrorism, a terrorist attack today. What do you think?
Yeah. Well, I heard the Prime Minister just say that, and my first question is, what does he know that I don't know and that you don't know? Because not a lot of information has been made public. No, fair enough, Rob. He's the Prime Minister. He might have access to intelligence that I no longer have access to. But all we know is that it was deliberate. London police have said it was premeditated, which suggests first-degree murder. they've suggested he targeted them because they're Muslim, which suggests a hate crime. Does not suggest terrorism at this point, because a hate crime is not a terrorist crime necessarily. The two are not the same thing. They're not synonymous. And, for terrorism charges to be laid by the Crown, there has to be a really strong link between a political, ideological, or religious motivation. And I'm sorry, we just don't know that just yet. So I think people are conflating hate with terrorism. They're not the same. It may turn out to be that way. But I don't know, again, unless there's information that they have that I don't have, I can't get there just yet. And if it's determined that he did this because he, subscribed to right-wing extremist websites and he was a member, I got no problems with terrorism. I'm just saying that as of noon on, June the 8th, we don't know that just yet.
Okay. This is what the Prime Minister said in the House of Commons in the last hour or so. Phil Gurski, let's listen to this together here.
Assalamu alaikum. Lately, a lot of Canadians have been enjoying evening walks to get a bit of fresh air after long days at home during this pandemic. On Sunday in London, Ontario, that's what a grandmother, 2 parents, and 2 children went out to do. 3 generations of the Afzul family. Salman, Madia, their children Yumna and Fayaz, and their grandmother. But unlike every other night, that family never made it home. Their lives were taken in a brutal, cowardly, and brazen act of violence. This killing was no accident. This was a terrorist attack motivated by hatred in the heart of one of our communities.
Okay, so no accident. You heard him there, a terror attack. What would you like to know now, Phil Gurski, if you're law enforcement right now, or if you're part of the intelligence apparatus in the country?
Mm-hmm.
What are you trying to figure out right now?
What was in his mind when he did this? How long had he been thinking about it? London police suggest it was premeditated. You may have seen, Rob, that he was arrested with some kind of an armored vest, which suggests he was preparing for some kind of shootout, perhaps, with law enforcement, although he was arrested without incident, as far as I can tell. Again, when we're talking terrorism, it's a very specific thing under the criminal code. I mean, there are hate crime provisions under the Canadian criminal code. It's a separate section of the code. And judges have the authority and the leeway when talking about this. If you commit a crime and it turns out you committed it for hateful reasons, the judges can actually increase your sentence. That's what the criminal code says. But, unless the suspect comes out and definitively says, I did this because of X, Y, or Z, or they find something on his laptop or his iPhone or whatever, where he has said something online or posted something online, we can't make that leap just yet. The fact that this was a terrifying incident, and by all means it was, does not mean it was terrorism. I understand the emotional appeal behind this. I understand the desire to want to call it this.
Okay.
But as a guy that spent 32 years in intelligence, I need to see something more concrete.
Like what?
Well, again, did he belong to a group? Did he subscribe to an ideology? Did he post things online? Was he part of a network of people that believed this way? Did he follow certain people? Was he radicalized by somebody who had these views? That's what determines terrorism, not the fact that, it was a heinous act of violence that appeared to target an ethnic group. There's lots of hate crimes in this country, Rob. They're not necessarily acts of terrorism. They're cowardly acts of violence, but they're not necessarily acts of terrorism.
Okay.
So I hate to be dogmatic here, Rob.
No, that's fine. So from an investigative point of view, you would think law enforcement now, they're in his apartment, they're going through all of his electronic devices, his correspondence there. They want to know his entire probably electronic history, right?
Yeah. And they're also probably contacting CSIS. I mean, CSIS is a body where, again, I spent 15 years there that does counterterrorism investigations. Did he come across their radar in investigations? Did the RCMP know anything about him? The OPP has a very small anti-terrorism section. Again, I worked there in 2015. I retired from CSIS. Do they have anything? So they don't want to cross all the T's, dot all the I's. The other thing, Rob, that your listeners should appreciate, if he's charged with terrorism and he's found guilty, there's no difference in the sentencing between that and first-degree murder. It's the same sentencing. If he's found guilty of murder and it's a hate crime, as I said earlier, then the judge has an actual a window to increase the sentence that is imposed on it. But for terrorism, he does not.
Yeah. The Prime Minister, as some of the opposition leaders pointed to, this is, part of the reason why we classified groups like the Proud Boys as a terrorist organization. What do you think about that, labeling, say, the so-called far-right groups as terrorist organizations?
If the label warrants, I've got no problem with it. I was involved in the first listing of Al-Qaeda way back in 2002, believe it or not.
Okay.
But I also know, and I put this on my website, Rob, I know for a fact, and I had this from very confirmed sources, that when the Proud Boys was suggested by the government as a terrorist organization, the security service pushed back and said, we don't have enough information to justify that listing. And yet it was listed anyway. So, listings is very much a political tool, I find. It does help in certain ways, in certain prosecutions, for instance, but let's not turn the listings regime into something that politicians are going to use for political purposes. And I think for the Proud Boys, that was a classic example. That was a knee-jerk reaction to the attack on the Capitol on January the 6th. I don't think they're a terrorist group. I think they're probably
in Washington.
Group.
In Washington.
I think they're probably a far-right group. Are they a terrorist group? Well, if someone can point to an actual act of terrorism they've carried out, I'd love to see it, because I haven't seen it yet. I'm not dismissing them. They're not a bunch of guys I want as my neighbors. Don't get me wrong.
Yeah. You're not inviting them over for a barbecue and some beers,
I'm not.
right?
But I'm not saying they're a terrorist group. Are they a hate group? Maybe. Are they a far-right group? Probably. Again, I'm not trying to mince words here, but, it's important that we do this properly.
Yeah.
And let me throw something else, Rob.
Yeah.
If they lay terrorism charges, and they can't prove beyond reasonable doubt that it was an act of terrorism versus first-degree murder, does the case fall apart?
Right.
Do they lose the case?
Right.
Again, so if you're the Crown, you want to win, right? You don't go to court to lose.
Yeah.
So the Crown's going to say, what is the best option we have? Alexandre Bissonnette in Quebec City was not charged with terrorism. He was found guilty of 6 counts of first-degree murder. Alec Banassian was not charged with terrorism. The guy out in Edmonton back in 2017 who hit the cop outside of Commonwealth Stadium had an ISIS flag on the dashboard. He was not charged with terrorism. He got 29 years for 5 counts of attempted murder. So I get as I said before, I get the emotional appeal of wanting to call it terrorism.
Okay.
But from a purely prosecution perspective, you don't necessarily have to go down that road to get the exact same result.
Okay. Very interesting. Phil Gurski, thank you so much. It's always so great to get your insight on these matters. Thank you again.
The pleasure's mine, Rob. Have a good day.
Yeah, you too. President and CEO, Borealis Threat and Risk Consulting, that's Phil Gurski. We'll be right back from that into another serious issues and the opposition parties passing a motion. There were abstentions by the cabinet yesterday, members of the Liberal cabinet. It called on the Liberal government to end court challenges against 2 key rulings on compensation for Indigenous children. So we're going to get into that, what played out, the language, the cases with Charlie Angus, the New Democrat member of Parliament. That's coming right up, right here on The Rob Snow Show on City News.
It's such a beautiful field because it's all natural. I'm able to talk to a lot of people who are going through different journeys of health where they really don't know where to start, where to begin. And I'm happy and grateful to have all this knowledge where I can actually help them and guide them. So, of course, medications have a great place in our system, but even so do natural therapies, which have been around for centuries and centuries. Like, old time, ancient times, everything, herbs grew, everything was done with nature, all healing was done with nature. So I'm totally in love with all the elements with nature. In our beautiful village of Manatik, the Manatik Natural Market, you can find tremendous different things. So we have herbs, we have vitamins, we have natural body care, we do infrared sauna therapy, nutrition counseling, acupuncture, Bowen therapy, energy healing. So we're like a wellness hub along with being a full health food store. We are 1 year into pandemic since it started last year in March. It was a shock. Usually I see things coming, and I definitely did not see that coming. Golden Root is a product that I created 4 years ago, actually for my kids, just for immune system, overall health. And it just took off with certain friends of mine who had cancer or some severe issues, and they started finding that it was really helping them from different tests they had done with their doctor. And I knew I had something really special. So then I went through the proper procedure of being able to sell it. So it's actually, I'm not allowed to make it anymore in my house 4 years ago, and it is made in a Health Canada approved lab, and then it comes to me. And what Golden Root is a formulation of turmeric, ginger, lavender, oregano, and black pepper, all food grade, which is the most bioavailable turmeric in the market right now for pain, inflammation, digestion, immune system, concussion, liver health, and brain health. So, and it tastes like salad dressing. We do a lot of in-house, so we make our in-house concoctions of teas. You can come here, tell us what your health issues are, and we can blend it right there. And there's some that are already prepared beforehand for sleeping, for anxiety, for different things. And in that bar, we basically make cold brew teas and cold brew nitrogen coffee. And again, it's all local. Everything we do is local, and as many herbs we can find locally as well. If a client can't come out, we'll go out of our way to deliver it. And you're getting that personal touch when you come in. If you have an issue, we will listen and help you. We're very, very active in the community, so we would like the same thing back for the community to come to.
Ottawa icon.
The Rob Snow Show returns
on Rogers TV and City News.
101.1 FM and 1310 AM.
So MPs from all parties joined the New Democrats. They call on the federal government to drop legal battles against a pair of rulings involving First Nations children. So to walk us through some of the background behind this, it's a great pleasure to welcome back to the Rob Snow Show New Democrat MP Charlie Angus. Good morning.
Good morning. Good morning.
Yeah, it's very nice to hear from you. The news has been rather depressing of late, but we must discuss it nonetheless. Tell me the history behind this motion that passed 271-0, but the cabinet abstained yesterday.
Yes. Well, this goes back to the Human Rights Tribunal ruling of 2016 that found the government was guilty of, quote, willful and reckless discrimination against First Nation children in two areas. One is in health services, because unlike folks, kids and grandkids who go to the hospital, they're under the provincial system. Indigenous kids on reserve are paid through the feds. Okay. And the feds simply refuse to pay for all manner of basic services that children in the provincial system took for granted. So that's a thing called Jordan's principle, that the feds can't sit and argue about who's going to pay for a child's health because children die. And the other is the broken child welfare system, where kids are disappeared into these broken foster homes, and the Indigenous kids get way, way less support, and many more of them die. So that was the ruling. And 2016, Justin Trudeau says, I recognize the ruling. We're going to work with the government, blah, blah, or the ruling. 19 non-compliance orders later, millions of dollars spent on lawyers, and Justin Trudeau still fighting him in court. So yesterday, Parliament told him, hey, just stop it. We have to start addressing these issues and stop fighting point by point. We need to get the rights and dignity of Indigenous kids. We got to just recognize that it's got to get done.
Okay. How does the issue of financial compensation work into the whole thing, Mr. Angus?
Well, the original ruling was not about financial compensation, and this is what the government's arguing. They're saying this is unfair. You're making us pay.
But I thought it said that First Nations children who were separated from their families because of the underfunded welfare system were entitled to $40,000, $50,000 in compensation.
The ruling has been on $40,000. But it's really important for people to know is that the original ruling didn't talk about compensation. It talked about the government fixing it. But after 19 non-compliance orders, the Human Rights Tribunal said this is the worst case we've ever seen of someone being found guilty and absolutely refusing to do the right thing. So the maximum penalty is $20,000 to $40,000. So the Human Rights Tribunal imposed that on the federal government because they hadn't done anything. So now that, of course, has given the government the chance to say this is outrageous, how dare you? And they're also saying something I think really insidious. They're saying we want to hear from the children. meaning they want to bring all these kids to court and make them testify and question them like they did the St. Anne's residential school survivors to prove that they've had their lives ruined. I'm sorry, if you've been taken from your family at age 4 and put in the foster care system, your life's been pretty buggered up. Those are the facts. We wouldn't be talking about compensation if the government had done the right thing. And the longer they wait, I think the more they're going to be facing from class actions and other lawsuits.
Okay. What is, a lot of us are well, I am anyway. We're trying to play catch up on a lot of these issues. And certainly what has happened in Kamloops is going to jar us all and put it all right in front of us. And we have to familiarize ourselves with a lot of things. For example, I know a little bit more about the Jordan Rule, which is more about the timing of a trial and how there has to be a speedy trial. Totally different from what's known as Jordan's Principle.
Yes.
So what is Jordan's Principle when it comes to First Nations children? Can you explain what Jordan's Principle is?
Well, Jordan's Principle is named after a little boy named Jordan River Anderson, who lived and died in a hospital bed because the federal government refused to pay for his treatment to go home. Any other child in that hospital, they would have moved him to his house and they would have gotten some support. But the Fed said, no, once he's out of the hospital, we're not paying. So the rule was, you can't let a kid live and die in a hospital bed because you're fighting with the province. So the Jordan's Principle is put the needs of the child first.
Okay.
So one of the things they were found guilty on recently was that we lost a bunch of little, very young kids in Wapakiko Reserve, and the community was begging the government. They had this program in place. The government cut the funding. They were saying, kids are going to die if we don't get this back up and running. And the government argued that it was their decision. They could make the decision when they would pay or not. And the ruling was, I'm sorry, when a kid's life is at risk now, you have to turn around and within 24 hours and say why you are going to support or not. That it put timelines on the government that had never been there before. And it was because kids have literally died while government lawyers have argued. So that's Jordan's Principle. Let's put the health of these kids first, and then you can argue jurisdiction with the provinces or whoever after. But the kids
provide the resources to the children, and then bicker amongst yourselves whether the bill is actually covered by the federal government or the provincial government.
Exactly.
Right. Yeah.
That is the fundamental of it.
Okay. So reading the news reports, a former residential school that keeps coming up in the news is St. Anne's. What was St. Anne's? Why is that in the news media all the time?
Well, St. Anne's is notorious for the torture and abuse of children. I mean, they used to strap kids to an electric chair as a kick for the staff that worked there. Little 5-year-olds being tortured in an electric chair. Kids who were raped, assaulted, killed. And when the St. Anne survivors went as part of these hearings that were set up under Prime Minister Harper, there were 10,000 pages of police evidence of crimes committed in that school. And the survivors went into the hearings, and the government lawyers said, there's no record of any crimes here. There's no record to prove that priest was here when you said he was. And they threw out all these cases. And, if you go to court and someone suppresses evidence to the case, that lawyer gets disbarred. If the Justice Department does it, well, you've got Carolyn Bennett who's going to back them up. So that's the issue with St. Anne's, is that the government needs to deal with the fact that they lied in these hearings. They suppressed the evidence of horrific brutality. They need to sit down with these survivors and figure out a solution, and they've refused to do that. So that was part of the motion yesterday, is just do the right thing.
Okay. So that was in Fort Albany, Ontario, it says.
Fort Albany, yes.
Yeah, which is near Saskatchewan, right?
Yes.
So,
yes.
Northern Ontario. So what are the ramifications then of this motion, given that it passed unanimously here, 271 to nothing, but again, the cabinet abstained. So what does that mean? What impact could that have, do you think?
Well, I think it has huge impact on the Trudeau government, because Justin Trudeau won, I think, largely in 2015 because people believed he was going to make things right with First Nation people.
Yeah.
the fact that Justin Trudeau skipped the vote.
Wasn't even there. Well, he wasn't even there.
Yeah, he wasn't even there. Didn't, what used to be his most important relationship, now he skips out. In 2 weeks, in a week, they go back to federal court against the children. And if Justice Department lawyers are in court in a week, people are going to say, wait a minute, Parliament ordered you to do the right thing. They ordered you to sit down and negotiate a solution. I think it's going to be really, really difficult for the Trudeau government to get away with this, because even the Liberal backbench broke ranks. The fact that the Liberal backbench would not support the government position shows that the Liberal MPs get this is, you can't treat kids like this. You can't, go total brass knuckles against little kids or against residential school survivors. So it's going to be a real moral test for the government if they figure they could ignore the call of Parliament. I don't know if there's a legal ability to call them in contempt of Parliament. I don't know if we have those tools, but we certainly have the moral tools to say, Parliament ordered you to do the right thing because you weren't going to do it on your own. But if you continue to fight in court, I think it's going to really damage. Well, I think the courts aren't going to be all that favorable to them.
Okay.
But it's certainly going to damage this Prime Minister even more. And he's taken a lot of hits. Why is he doing this? I just don't get it.
What more do you think could be done to put pressure on church officials?
Well, this is a big thing. All the churches that were involved in the residential schools, they made the formal apologies and they paid reparations. And they got off scot-free, because considering, if these went to massive lawsuits, they would have all been out of business. The problem was that the Catholic Church walked away on the money it owed. The Catholic Church ran the biggest institutions and some of the most notorious institutions. I say that I came out of the Catholic schools, I came out of the Catholic community, but they've never taken responsibility. They've never turned over the documents they're supposed to. It's like the sex abuse cases in the United States. They put the big wall of silence. I don't think they're going to be able to get away with that either. People want this thing figured out. People are horrified. We know there's going to be many mass graves found. So let's acknowledge it. Let's try and get the names of these children. Let's get the apology. Canadians expect this. This is the least Canadians expect. So my message to Justin Trudeau and to the Catholic Church is time to step up to the plate, boys, and do the right thing.
Thank you, Charlie Angus.
Okay, thanks so much.
Bye-bye.
Okay, bye.
The MP for Timmins-James.
This program is brought to you by Ignite TV. Now you're in command. Visit Rogers.com for more details.